But Setsuna, with his classic reincarnation manhwa protagonist intuition, knew exactly what was happening. He launched himself forward, tackling Min out of the way just as a massive death beam vaporized the spot where he'd been standing. A skeletal hand clawed its way out of the treasure chest, followed by the rest of a nightmarish creature. For a dungeon that was supposedly a one-star cakewalk, this thing looked absolutely terrifying. The sheer power rolling off this monster was on another level. Setsuna didn't need a system window to tell him what this was. It was the no-life king, a literal monarch of death. He could practically hear the dark fire whispering, "It's out. One touch from this thing, and you're trapped in a permanent nightmare." The monster growled, demanding to know who dared interrupt its nap. It promised them all a permanent dirt nap for their trouble. Drago was floored. "It can talk?" Setsuna immediately went into leader mode. "Drago, back off. This thing's on a different level. I'll handle it." He was literally telling Drago to stay out of the blast zone and let him cook. But Drago's brain was still stuck on the leaderboard. He actually muttered aloud, "Dude, I wonder how many points this guy is worth." The monster didn't wait for an answer, firing a blast at Min, but Setsuna zipped in like a flash to slash the attack away. Drago, bless his heart, tried to go in for a punch. The creature just casually summoned a barrier that stopped him dead in his tracks. Drago was shook. It cast a magic circle from that far away. As he stumbled back, he figured his monoguard armor was the only thing that kept him from being turned into a red smear on the floor. The monster, now officially ticked off, roared and charged, screaming that it was going to end them. It started spam casting multiple magic circles at once, and Satsuna's mind was racing. This level of intelligence and magic. This thing has to be at least a 4-star boss. The attacks all converged, and a magic circle popped up right in front of a stunned Min. "Wake up," Setsuna yelled, just as Drago blitzed in, slashing the magic circle to bits and saving Min's hide. Min finally snapped out of his daze. Drago offered a hand to help him up. Min actually took it. But Satsuna's attention was already elsewhere. 2 more magic circles were forming around Yuzua, and she was just standing there, frozen. Setsuna launched himself across the room, grabbing her and pulling her clear of the attack. "You okay?" he asked. She just nodded. "Thanks for asking," she said. But something felt totally wrong. Yuzua's behavior was a massive red flag, but Setsuna wondered if he was just being paranoid. While he was having his internal debate, Drago was playing a deadly game of Fruit Ninja with the magic circles, clearing a path. Setsuna tapped his bracelet and gave Drago a look. Drago got it instantly, way ahead of you. Min, meanwhile, was completely lost, having no clue what their silent plan was. He figured it wasn't his problem anyway. His only goal was to snag the final kill, get the points, and bounce. Drago gave him the side eye. "You're not seriously planning on pulling that stunt again, are you?" Min put on his most innocent face. "Who? Me? Never. Not to the guy who just saved my life." He swore he was going to do the exact opposite. He'd help them, which in Min's dictionary just meant letting them do all the hard work so he could steal the reward. Drago wasn't buying it. He was not about to get his points jacked again. Setsuna, in the middle of all this chaos, had a sudden flashback to his fight with Leo in the final blue field. The whole battle was replaying in his mind. He realized his charged bullet had been way too weak, a fundamental error that cost him the win. That loss taught him a crucial lesson, the kind you see in every great academy manhwa. Master the basics before you get fancy. Satsuna's mind flashed back to that conversation with Lionel, right after he and Drago had aced their court training and were hungry for more. Lionel had heaved this massive sigh, like he was about to spill a family secret, and admitted it was probably time to give them something he'd been saving. Big reveal? Magically weighted bands. He broke it down. "Wear these during training, and you'll build some serious, next-level strength. The moment they come off, your physical stats would go through the roof." But he gave Setsuna the side eye, warning him not to push it since he wasn't fully healed yet. He literally called it an old-school brute force method, which is code for, "This is gonna suck, so don't be an idiot." Setsuna and Drago, of course, ate it up and thanked him. And now, in the thick of a boss battle, Setsuna knew it was time for the big power-up reveal. He and Drago both ripped the bands off and tossed them aside. Mifune's eyes went wide. "You're telling me they were handicapped this whole time?" Meanwhile, the monster starts conjuring another attack, totally oblivious to the anime power-up happening right in front of it. But with the training weights gone, both Setsuna and Drago slammed the physical boost button, blitzing the monster with blinding speed. They danced around its attacks like they were standing still, peppering it with lightning-fast, heavy-hitting counters. Drago launched himself into the air, lining up a devastating kick. The creature actually managed to get a block up, but Drago just smirked. "That might have worked a minute ago, pal, but you're too late now." Before the monster could even process that sick burn, bam, Setsuna and Drago landed a perfectly synchronized blow. Mifune was just frozen, his brain short-circuiting. How are they so OP? A massive explosion ripped through the area. When the dust finally settled, the no-life king was officially no more. Their points shot up by 50 apiece, and Drago figured they split the prize since it was a tag-team takedown. Mifune, still in total shock, just could not process what he'd just seen. Was this the real power level they'd been hiding? He'd never seen a melee-type magic student in any academy manhwa pull off moves that were even close to that strong. Just then, Setsuna turned to call for Yuzua, only to find she'd completely vanished. And right on cue, the ground started shaking violently. A gnarly earthquake rocked the dungeon, and massive cracks began to spiderweb beneath their feet. Mifune lost his footing and was about to eat dirt, but Setsuna caught him. That's when they saw it, a literal swarm of terrifying monsters flooding the horizon. The creatures let out a deafening roar, eyes glowing with pure rage, and in seconds, they crashed down on the other students. Absolute panic erupted as everyone scrambled for their lives. Satsuna's heart was pounding. What kind of messed up dungeon was this? As the horde closed in, he, Drago, and Mifune went to work, starting to mow them down. Setsuna shouted out the strategy, aim for the heads and nothing else. While Mifune was busy popping zombie melons, he noticed they weren't getting a single point from the kills. It hit him that if Setsuna hadn't figured that out, they would have been wasting their stamina on a completely pointless grind. While clearing out zombies, Setsuna put it all together. These things were revived by dark power, so they didn't give points because they just kept getting back up. It's the worst kind of bugged quest. Drago grunted that there was nothing of value in these trash mobs. Mifune then pointed out how weird it was to see monsters this gnarly in a dinky one-star dungeon. That's when Setsuna felt that a powerful, nasty aura seeping up from below. He asked the others if they could feel that sinister magic, but Mifune was skeptical. "You sure you're not just spooked?" he asked. But Setsuna was positive, and he had a gut feeling Yuzua was the source. Without a word, Drago decided he was going down first. Mifune hesitated, wondering if he should follow. Setsuna shot him a look and deadpanned. "It's not really a choice. What's your plan, staying up here by yourself?" Mifune looked a little offended, like his skills were being dissed. So Setsuna twisted the knife, pointing out that Mifune's main skill so far was stealing points from the freshman before dropping down himself. Mifune glanced at the endless wave of monsters and muttered that there wasn't a single thing he liked about this so-called training. Grumbling, Mifune followed them down. As he watched Setsuna and Drago fight, he couldn't help but notice how perfectly synchronized they were, like a two-man wrecking crew. He wondered out loud if this was their first time even training together. Drago, overhearing him, shot back, "You're pretty chatty for a guy in a zombie apocalypse." Mifune retorted it was better than listening to the undead groaning. Setsuna tuned them both out, his focus lasered in on the source of that corrupt mana he'd sensed from the start. And there it was, the monster in charge, the likely source of this whole dark energy fiasco. Setsuna, our resident expert, pegged it as a new brand of eyeball freak he'd never seen, noting the creepy magic circle on the floor was the generator for all this bad juju. Mayun, sensing his teammates were basically clueless about Dungeon Crawling 101, puffed out his chest and suggested they follow his lead. A second later, Drago stretched, accidentally clocked Mayun, and offered a quick, "My bad." Ignoring the drama, Setsuna delivered the final blow to the monster, banking a clean 10 points. That's when the floor started to rumble, and Drago wondered aloud if the zombie squad was on its way. Setsuna confirmed, "They know we took out their power source," adding that they should just wipe the floor with them and rack up the points. Drago, looking like he desperately needed to punch something, was more than ready to throw down. Mayun, meanwhile, was having an internal meltdown, wondering if his two companions were even capable of fear. As a student who valued his life, all he could do was stand there and hyperventilate. His plan, get 100 points and get the heck out of there. That's when Setsuna casually asked him about Yuzua. Mayun had no clue, guessing she probably freaked out and bolted. But Setsuna wasn't buying that excuse. Yuzua didn't exactly seem like the panicky type, not even when they faced that no-life king. He'd been getting a weird vibe from her. Plus, a one-star dungeon shouldn't have monsters like these, straight out of some high-tier academy manhwa. They were all leaking this nasty dark magic, and it was setting off all of Setsuna's alarm bells. He figured he might be overthinking it, but he had a sneaking suspicion one of the apostles was behind this whole mess. If he was right, this was way too dangerous for Drago and Mayun. He just hoped Isla and the others were safe. Drago snapped him out of it, pointing out the undead closing in and announcing it was hunting season. He then proceeded to punch his way through the horde, with Setsuna and Mayun providing backup. Points started flying. After the dust settled, Setsuna was at 225 points, Drago had 210, and Mayun had just cleared the bar with 125. Mayun immediately declared he was out. Drago called him on it, asking if he was just going to ditch his friend Yuzua. Mayun had to clarify that they literally had their first conversation the day before. He admitted he thought she was kind of weird for being so friendly out of nowhere. His best guess was that she got spooked and just ran for it, and was probably outside, crying her eyes out. As Mayune turned to leave, Setsuna told Drago that they were both going to find Yuzua. Mayune started to panic, complaining that the transport spell wasn't working. Setsuna deadpanned that he could just walk, making Mayune sputter. "Are you kidding me right now?" Despite his protests, Mayune tagged along. Drago helpfully pointed out the obvious. The transport spell was busted, so their bracelets were probably on the fritz. Setsuna once again felt that sinister magic creeping up from below. He told Drago he was going to scout ahead for Yuzua, saying he'd be fine on his own. Mayune, completely misreading the room, blurted out, "Dude, you got a crush on her or something?" Drago, ever the loyal friend, ignored him and told Setsuna he was coming with. Setsuna agreed but warned Drago to run if things got sketchy. Mayune, still debating his life choices, thought the smartest move was to run back and tell Giovanni everything. Besides, he argued, there was no proof Yuzua was even still down there. Setsuna shut him down, saying that while it was faint, he could definitely still sense her mana. He suggested Mayun go ahead and report to Giovanni, telling him to be careful. This just ticked Mayun off even more. He was convinced Yuzua had just ditched them. Going deeper felt like suicide, but trying to escape alone felt even worse. This whole day was a total disaster. Drago put a hand on his shoulder. Look, let's find Yuzua, and then we can all hide together. Mayuni reluctantly agreed, saying as long as they could leave right after it was in. As they ventured downstairs, Mayun couldn't help but ask how only Setsuna could sense Yuzua's mana. Satsuna's reply was simple. Practice. Just then, Drago stopped dead. The air went frigid, so thin it was hard to breathe. They all froze, listening intently. There was a sound. Setsuna pointed. Drago moved forward, whispering, "Someone's there." "Is it Yuzua?" Mayune asked, his voice shaking. For one glorious second, they felt relief it was her. Then came the horror. She was trapped in a dark magic circle, half her body being absorbed as she begged for help. Mayuni squeezed his eyes shut, his mind reeling. Before anyone could move, Satsuna's voice cut through the air, sharp and commanding. Drago, don't get any closer, laying it all out. She was snagged in a trap, but, he pointed out, there wasn't a single scuff mark or magical residue to prove the trap was even from this dungeon. His theory? Yuzua was rocking some cursed item laced with dark magic. He'd seen this script before. It was the same kind of shady gear his buddy copped from the black market, right before his whole reincarnation Manhwa journey kicked off. Setsuna was dead sure Yuzua didn't do it on purpose, meaning she was totally set up. He broke it down for them. This particular brand of magical mess could only be cleaned up with a very specific counterspell, and to cast that spell, they needed a weapon juiced up with it. Done with the talking, Setsuna just went for it, shattering the trap and yanking Yuzua straight out of the glowing circle of doom. She immediately went limp in his arms as he's all like, "Stay with me." That's when he spotted it. The source of all this drama was the bling in her ear. Mifyun's brain was basically buffering, trying to process what just happened and if there was a reset button anywhere. Setsuna, ever the hero, just hoisted her onto his back, declaring babysitting duty was in effect. He let out a sigh of relief, thankful they got to her before things went from bad to catastrophic, and made a mental note to give Giovanni the full, insane rundown later. He was betting his life savings that the apostle was the puppet master behind this whole fiasco. Drago, meanwhile, was just taking in the sheer weirdness of it all before reminding them their main quest was, not dying here with Yuzua. So Setsuna tells Mifyun to try hitting the teleport home button again. Mifyun gives it a shot and nothing. The spell was officially ghosting them. He grumbled out loud, wondering if Giovanni sold him a lemon. Setsuna, thinking fast, grabbed Yuzua's bracelet to try her escape hatch, only to find out it was also on the fritz. "Can we please bounce before this gets even dumber?" Drago pleaded. And right on cue, the whole place started shaking like a cheap motel bed. Earthquake? Whatever it was their signal to get the hell out. Drago took point, yelling for them to stay on his 6. Mifyun could only think, welp, never a boring day in this godforsaken dungeon. Suddenly, the ceiling decided to become the floor, showering rocks down right in front of them. Drago screamed for Mifyun to book it, but it was a wrap. Their exit was now a solid wall of rubble. "Okay, new plan. We find a way that times isn't times trying to kill us," Setsuna said, stating the obvious. Cut 2. Ela and her crew, wandering through the same mess, yelling to see if any other poor souls were around. Picked up a faint cry for help and found some kid literally stuck between a rock and a hard place. After a quick rescue op, Ela patched him up with a bit of healing magic to keep him from checking out. The kid, still shaken, was worried about other survivors and then confirmed their fears. There was someone else buried behind the rock slide. Ela sent a prayer up, hoping Setsuna and Drago weren't the ones playing pancake under the rocks. Back with our heroes, they were having a little powwow by the cave-in, where Drago's brilliant idea was to just shoot it. Setsuna, the designated adult in the room, had to explain that, yeah, firing a mini nuke might just, bring the rest of the ceiling down on their heads. Drago argued that if they could just clear the path, they'd be golden. Setsuna agreed, but added the tiny little detail that they were also running out of breathable air. While Drago was trying to math that one out, Setsuna dropped the bomb. "I have a plan, but it involves going deeper into this nightmare." Catch? They couldn't exactly drag Mifyun and an unconscious Yuzua along for the ride. Playing pack mule for 2 people was not on the agenda. So, Setsuna declared he was going solo. Mifyun was like, "Dude, what's your play here?" He knew Setsuna was a beast, but this was a whole other level of crazy. The Academy Manhwa setting was one thing, but going deeper meant facing whatever boss-level monsters were lurking down there. He was not about to let Setsuna go on a suicide run. Setsuna admitted he was spitballing, but his best guess was that the dungeon itself was waking up. The teleport spells failed because the mana was so thick you could cut it with a knife. This definitely wasn't a 1-star tutorial level anymore. Drago had to give it to him. "Damn, kid, you're sharp," he admitted, impressed at how fast Setsuna put the pieces together. Setsuna just shrugged it off, crediting his little trip back in time for the intel. With the plan set, Mifyun told Drago to hold down the fort and wish Setsuna a don't die out there. Setsuna hit them with the classic, "Don't worry, I'll be fine," and told Drago to leave some breadcrumbs. Then, with a hero's resolve, he ventured off to find the dungeon's back door. Plunging into the darkness, Setsuna started having some serious doubts. Could he really take on a dungeon boss with just his fists? This wasn't some simple manhwa where you just punch your way to victory. A little fire or holy magic would have been clutch against the inevitable undead hordes. But no, his build was all about getting up close and personal, relying on pure physical beatdowns. The big downside to his class, throwing around elemental spells was basically a no-go. But then, he felt something. A massive churning power bubbling up from inside him. And just as things were getting interesting, as Drago went full-on beast mode clearing rubble, Mifune was having a major dumb moment, realizing that the guy winning the melee magic contest wasn't just some lucky fluke. Nope. Turns out Drago and Setsuna were actually putting in the work while he was busy with cheap shots. Talk about a classic Academy manhwa side character crisis. If you love seeing characters get a much-needed reality check, go ahead and smash that subscribe button, because we've got plenty more coming. He was feeling like a total chump when Drago, ever the bro, told him to hang tough and they'd get out. Then, out of nowhere, a voice cuts through the dust. "Anybody in there?" Drago yelled back, confirming they weren't just hearing things. On the other side of the rock pile, Isla's crew was on search and rescue duty, and one of her guys swore he heard movement. Isla, immediately thinking of her boy, called out, "Drago, is that you? Where's Setsuna?" Drago confirmed they were alive and kicking. "Setsuna's off trying to find another way out," he explained. Isla, ready to jump in, asked if they could help move the rocks. Meanwhile, as Setsuna descended the stairs, he could feel the air getting thick and nasty, a dead giveaway he was closing in on the dungeon's core. He spots a gate, wondering if it's the express lane out of this hellhole, but the sheer boss-level energy radiating from it had his guard way up. It was suspiciously empty for a place reeking of so much dark power. He was on high alert, and good thing too. From the shadows above, two pairs of eyes were locked on him. Suddenly, a monster dives at him, but he zips back, dodging the attack with inches to spare. Trying to get a read on this thing, he notices it's got two heads. Fantastic. It's a two-headed hydra. Setsuna instantly understood the source of all the chaos. The thing was literally rotting on its feet, a clear sign of forced resurrection. There's only one sicko with the power for that kind of necromancy, Vidra. The hydra unleashes a cloud of toxic gas, and Setsuna leaps back again to avoid the nasty surprise. He knew getting too close for too long was a one-way ticket to the afterlife. If he didn't put this thing down fast, this dungeon was about to get a whole lot deadlier. He took a quick gulp of clean air. Mission was simple: delete the hydra and do it now. He charged in, blades flashing, but even after landing several hits, it wasn't enough. He zipped behind the creature, his brain flashing back to his last hydra rodeo. He remembered it didn't go down until all the heads were rolling. So, the game plan was to focus on one head at a time. Problem was, its skull was tougher than a $2 steak. He switched targets, aiming for the weakest point he could find. He was dead set on taking at least one head off. But the second head retaliated with a stream of acid. Setsuna dodged, but a few drops sizzled through his clothes. He grimaced, thinking if that stuff had made direct contact, his body would have been a puddle on the floor. Then, to make matters worse, the second head regenerated. Of course, it had undead-style healing. This fight would never end if he just kept lopping off one head at a time. He had to take them both out simultaneously. With his ranged magic, he could have spammed spells and won easily. But he saw this as the perfect chance to test drive a new technique. He remembered back when he couldn't pull it off to save his life. Lionel had found him, asking if he was trying to dual wield. It was a bold move for a student, but Setsuna's mind was writing checks his body couldn't cash. A classic reincarnation manhwa problem: your brain is max level, but your body is still in the tutorial. Lionel had laid it out for him. Dual wielding is brutally hard, and it starts with mastering the mana inside your own body. Setsuna thought about how crucial mana control really was. He'd been thinking of his body like his old OP self from before he time traveled, but this current model was a totally different machine. Thankfully, all that basic training he'd been grinding while recovering had seriously leveled up his mana control. But this was the first time he was trying the technique for real since that day. He focused, telling himself to grab his main sword first, then draw the second for the attack. He went for it, but his blade felt sluggish and weak. Midair, the hydra's tail whipped out and slammed him into the wall like a ragdoll. Still, he somehow landed on his feet and got ready to go again. He could feel his mana draining way faster than he'd anticipated. The hydra launched another acid attack. He dodged, knowing that if it slowed him down, another hit would be fatal. He knew his body couldn't take another smack like that. He couldn't afford to die here. He took a step back, steeling himself. This was his last chance. He took one final, deep breath. Tapping into his final reserves, Setsuna reminds himself not to choke now. He baits the hydra, making it smash its face into the wall, and then he leaps, unleashing a god-tier flurry of slashes with both swords. After a cinematic series of strikes, the hydra's head finally makes a clean break from its body. Just as Setsuna figured, losing two heads was its hard limit on regeneration. He glances at his messed up hand. Yeah, his dual-wielding game is still a little janky. And right on cue, Giovanni strolls in, slow clapping like a true villain, commenting that beating his little pet project with just melee magic was, quote, impressive. Casually guesses that Setsuna must have been the one who actually wrecked Leo that night. Setsuna just pivots, staring down this new problem. Giovanni notes that Setsuna isn't even flinching, almost like he was expecting company. Talk about a poker face. Setsuna basically shrugs, saying this isn't his first surprise party and he's always ready for anything. Giovanni actually respects the attitude, admitting that grunts with tunnel vision don't last long on the battlefield. He sees that Setsuna has the brawn and the brains to back it up. So, Setsuna cuts the small talk and hits him with 2 questions. 1. Is Giovanni one of the apostles? And 2. What's his deal? Giovanni explains that after seeing Setsuna fight, he had a single, creepy thought. What a perfect specimen. He literally wants to get his hands on Setsuna's corpse and turn him into an undead puppet, just like he did with Yuzua. And boom, the penny drops. Setsuna realizes this psycho is the monster behind Yuzua's transformation. Giovanni goes on, saying Yuzua weirdly volunteered to be his guide. He had high hopes for her, but she was just so irritating, always bugging him and even snatching his earrings like it was no big deal. A fool like her should consider it an honor to become my undead puppet, Giovanni sneers. Setsuna's knuckles turn white. Enough, shut up, he roars. He vows to make Giovanni pay for every last thing. Meanwhile, back with the B Squad, the other students are totally gassed from moving rocks and are pretty sure they're about to die of exhaustion. But finally, Drago breaks through and sees Ayla, and the relief is real. She's just glad he's in one piece. Drago thanks everyone for the hard work and says they just need to bounce from the dungeon. Ayla admits she has no clue where they are, but hey, silver lining, the quaking has stopped and the ominous red glow is way dimmer now. Drago immediately figures Setsuna must have clapped the dungeon's final boss. Then Mum points out that his bracelet is blinking, reacting to his magic. When Ayla sees it too, she suggests they get to higher ground to find a spot where a teleport will actually work. Drago asks Ayla to take the lead, since Setsuna is still MIA. He's not leaving his boy behind. He has to go down and make sure he's okay. Ayla gets it, promising they'll wait for them both on the outside. Drago thanks her and heads back into the fray. Back in the boss room, Setsuna is radiating pure rage, promising Giovanni a world of hurt. Giovanni just smirks, all like, that's a big promise, little man. Fueled by fury, Setsuna throws a haymaker, but Giovanni pulls a cheap trick, using Frost Phantom to become an ice clone that shatters on impact. Setsuna is completely stunned by the move, and in that split second, a razor-sharp piece of ice nails him from across the room. Giovanni reappears, commenting on how crude melee magic is. He says it's only good for close quarters brawling and mocks Setsuna, saying, "You didn't seriously think I'd just let you hit me with such a pathetic attack, did you?" The light bulb goes off for Setsuna. Giovanni isn't a fighter, he's a trickster who loves to hit you when you're not looking. This isn't a brawl, it's a twisted game. He also knows his mana tank is running on fumes after the Hydra fight. He has to end this fast. He charges forward, his brain kicking into overdrive, figuring Giovanni's teleportation must have a tell, kinda like the formation magic Mew uses. It's a classic puzzle you'd find in any Academy manhwa. As Setsuna winds up for another strike, the same ice clone trick blocks him. But this time, he looks back and spots the tell, a magic circle fading where Giovanni just teleported from. Another ice attack slams into him, and Setsuna realizes his body feels like lead. That poison from earlier is really starting to kick in. After the hit, Giovanni taunts him again, basically telling him to just lie down and die already. But Setsuna just screams at him to shut up. He swears he'll never forgive Giovanni and that he's going to undo the curse on Yuzua. Giovanni's smug look shifts to one of genuine curiosity. "Oh, so you actually know how to break the curse?" Giovanni, completely clueless, couldn't grasp why Setsuna was so hung up on Yuzua, explaining she was basically the prize for luring our hero into this mess. He then offered a solution if Setsuna still times wanted to break the curse, which involved Giovanni yanking a fistful of his hair like a schoolyard bully. The deal? Just bend the knee and pledge eternal loyalty. "Yeah, right." Setsuna, absolutely livid, answered with his blade, but Giovanni just poofed a few feet away. As Setsuna charged again, Giovanni had an oh moment, realizing the kid had cracked his teleportation code. A split second later, Setsuna's attack actually connected, slicing both of Giovanni's arms clean off. But Giovanni, cool as a cucumber, just smirked, calling Setsuna a quick learner. His arms grew back like some lizard's tail as he declared his intent to add Setsuna to his creepy undead collection. Apparently, there were still a few lessons to be taught. That's when it clicked for Setsuna, this psycho was undead too. Giovanni was all too happy to confirm it. He spun a whole sob story about being on death's door before Vidra showed up, granting him immortality. Now, he sees himself as Vidra's ultimate masterpiece, a villain origin story straight out of a reincarnation manhwa. In his view, regular humans are just pathetic, fragile things that get old and turn to dust way too easily. What a pity, he says. So, this guy's divine mission is to give deserving people the gift of an immortal body. He then taunted Setsuna, basically saying, "You're out of gas, kid. Might as well give up." And honestly, Setsuna was feeling it. His strength was tanking, his head was spinning, but he knew he had to pull something out of the hat. Just as he was about to fade, he felt a presence. Someone was on their way. Meanwhile, Giovanni started chanting some dark, spooky magic from below, smugly asking if Setsuna was at a loss for words. It finally hit Setsuna, a freaking ritual was about to go down. But just as Giovanni got into his evil groove, a wild Drago appeared, and he announced his arrival by whipping a rock at Giovanni's head. That was all the opening Setsuna needed to land a solid punch. The same ice magic flared up, but this time, something felt different. Setsuna felt the tide turning. He dodged out of the magic circle just as an ice spike shot up where he'd been standing. "You good, bro?" Drago called out. "Dude, you're a literal lifesaver," Setsuna shot back. Drago clocked the injuries, but Setsuna just brushed it off, insisting he was fine and ready for round 2. He quickly asked about Mifune and Yuzua. Drago gave the quick rundown. Everyone's heading for the exit, and they've already linked up with Ila and the other squads on the upper floors. Setsuna figured if Ila was on the case, the others were in good hands. Giovanni, on the other hand, was having a fit. "Who dares to interrupt my master plan?" He seethed, clearly not expecting Drago. Drago just pointed and asked, "Is this the guy?" Setsuna gave him a hard yes. He laid it all out. Giovanni was the puppet master behind this whole dungeon disaster, and they needed to shut him down, like, right now. Drago was fuming, pissed that this monster had been posing as an instructor. You don't see this kind of drama even in the craziest academy manhwa. Setsuna wasted no time, giving Drago the cliff notes on Giovanni's fight pattern. "Okay, so we gotta be fast on the dodge," he explained. "He teleports. We hit him. He can't spam the port, so that's our window. The plan. Drago goes in first to draw him out, and Setsuna follows up for the finisher." Setsuna added that Giovanni's teleport was already getting way slower. One more solid combo should do it, he figured. Drago was all in. Giovanni, meanwhile, was just cursing them out, calling them irritating fools as Drago charged in. A burst of ice magic exploded as Giovanni blinked to his next spot, warning them not to underestimate his bag of tricks. He even boasted he could cast Frostbite. Big talk. While he was monologuing, Setsuna saw his chance and went in for the kill, landing a brutal flurry of punches. The assault slammed Giovanni into a wall, where he crumpled in a heap. But the effort completely drained Setsuna, who, running on fumes, finally collapsed and passed out. Giovanni, barely conscious himself, wheezed that he really didn't want to use the special gift Vidra had given him. Then he started pulling something out of his own body. His thoughts were on a hydra and a plan to merge with it. He glared at Drago and growled. "This ain't over." Drago could only watch in horror as the transformation began. The guy started twisting into some kind of monstrosity, sneering that these arrogant kids had forced him to play his trump card. He whined that he had no other choice but to use Vidra's little present to deal with them, promising a world of regret. But plot twist, Setsuna wasn't completely out for the count. He knew if he didn't pull something out of his hat, Giovanni was going to run the whole show. Right as Setsuna felt himself about to black out for good, he saw a flash of light. Suddenly, a lecture from the headmaster about elemental magic, how it all works, and what it's all about, just pops into his head. Setsuna's brain went, "Hold up, this is exactly like that trance-like state the old man described." He could literally feel the spirit energy buzzing all around him, so he reached out to the flare, basically praying the spirit would spot him some power to save everyone. And you won't believe it, the spirit actually answered, telling him to quit making such a scene. Setsuna's entire world started to warp and twist, and suddenly there were stones just floating in midair. The vibe was completely different from the dungeon. He was seriously wondering if he'd been teleported to a whole new dimension. He whipped around and saw a colossal spirit just chilling, surrounded by more flares. Yeah, he was definitely not in Kansas anymore. This thing wasn't just some ghost. It was a physical titan, big enough to swallow Setsuna in one gulp, with a mana aura that screamed, "I am extremely hostile." The sheer pressure of its presence was overwhelming, just standing there. But Setsuna, channeling his inner Manhwa protagonist, squared up to the spirit and asked if it would hear him out. He laid it all out how Vidra and his cronies were terrorizing humans back home, and how his friends were in serious, life or death trouble. He begged for the spirit's help. The spirit, however, was monumentally unimpressed by his nerve. The ground beneath Setsuna's feet just exploded. The flares surrounding the spirit blazed to life like miniature suns. Even from a distance, it felt like his entire body was being set on fire. The spirit decided it would listen, but only to enjoy the sound of Setsuna begging. Completely oblivious to his place in the cosmos, the spirit's basically like, "And why should I care about any of that?" before making 4 massive stones rise up and trap Setsuna. Setsuna, ever the optimist, asked, "So, is that a hard no on the helping me out thing?" The spirit's reply was colder than your ex's heart, stating it had zero interest in Setsuna's sob story. The flares on the stones went supernova, locking Setsuna in a cage of pure fire. The flames roaring around him were on a whole other level. The spirit mocked him, saying the place used to be nice and cool, but now it was going to be a blessing of the inferno, designed to turn Setsuna into a pile of ash. Setsuna knew this was it. If he gave up, he was literally toast. He had to figure out a way to get through to this grumpy, oversized fire starter. The spirit was actually surprised he was still conscious, realizing any normal human would have been vaporized ages ago. Then the spirit sensed it, the presence of the spirit of time, chilling inside Setsuna, all while Setsuna was screaming his lungs out, pleading with the spirit to just listen. The spirit, noticing Setsuna was still trying to fight back, just found him annoying. Like it was his job to deal with some disgusting monster from another world and its pathetic little minions. Setsuna's brain latched onto that. Another world? Does this thing know about Vidrak? So he just shouted, full-on reincarnation, Manhwa style, "I will absolutely defeat them. And that's why I'm asking you to lend me your power," he yelled. The spirit just cranked the heat higher, saying that beating them was way, way above Setsuna's pay grade. No matter how much he fought, he was just trapped in this infinitely looping space, doomed to burn for all eternity. Setsuna shot back that he didn't care and would never, ever back down. The spirit actually paused, intrigued, and said, "Prove it," before unleashing absolute hellfire on him. The pain was excruciating, as his body was literally set ablaze. He couldn't breathe, couldn't feel a thing anymore, but he refused to pass out. His mind raced. Is Drago okay? What's happening back in the dungeon? What was Drago even doing there? It was way too early to give up, not when he still hadn't put Vidra 6 feet under. Then Setsuna gathered every last shred of his will and begged the spirit to lend him its power so he could save everyone from Vidra's grasp. The spirit was floored, thinking, "This is unbelievable. No human can take these flames." Yet, here was this kid, desperately trying to protect the people on the outside. The spirit noticed Setsuna was still standing his ground, even after he'd clearly lost consciousness. It found the whole display entertaining. The spirit finally relented, telling him to get out of its sight and go teach those villains a lesson. At long last, Setsuna got the power of the spirit. Meanwhile, back in the dungeon, Drago was feeling a weird kind of satisfaction, thinking his mana guard hadn't completely failed against that ice magic. Ghidini sneered that it was impressive a mere human had lasted this long, all thanks to that stubborn pride as a melee magician. However, Drago's struggle was totally futile, and Ghidini just smirked as he grabbed Drago by the collar. Drago could feel his senses getting hazy from the last attack. Gideoni, in full-on villain monologue mode, announces he's going to one-shot Drago and his buddies, slicing them into confetti. To prove his point, he yeets Drago straight into a wall. Drago's internal dashboard is flashing red. His mana guard is offline, and his entire defensive playbook is empty. He's basically a sitting duck for whatever Gideoni throws next. And what do you do when you're about to get deleted? Flashback time. Drago's thinking about his dad, who always said his real strength was being a human shield for his crew, the true calling of a melee mage. The regret is hitting him hard. He feels like he's failing the one job his dad gave him, and just as Gideoni's death blow is about to connect, Drago braces for impact, knowing he's got nothing left. But then, a weird vibe hits the air. Even Gideoni seems surprised, muttering something like, "Huh, didn't think you had it in you." He's wondering if he overdid it, then does a double take. Drago's gone. And in his place, Setsuna, standing there looking like a human solar flare. Drago, feeling the sudden heat, is just thinking, "Setsuna?" Meanwhile, Gideoni's jaw is on the floor, staring at this insane power-up, and then poof, Setsuna vanishes. Before Gideoni can even process it, Setsuna teleports in with a haymaker that sends the undead freak redecorating the wall with his face. Gideoni's brain is short-circuiting. Since when can a brawler use elemental magic? He's also noticing his health regen is lagging, and those flames on Setsuna. Yeah, they're not your standard campfire. Then he spots it a second crest on Setsuna's body. Hold up, that means our boy is running a dual-class build. That's supposed to be impossible. For the first time, Gideoni feels a flicker of actual fear. He tries to squash it by screaming, "Impossible!" and charging in like a maniac. He's yelling about how he's undead, a guy who literally beat death, and unleashes a swirling vortex of pure toxic sludge, convinced no living thing can walk through it. But Setsuna just strolls through it, casually parting the poison sea with a flex of his mana. Gideoni is absolutely bug-eyed, like, where did this kid download this cheat code? The raw power radiating off Setsuna is just staggering. Gideoni's whole game plan is in shambles, and he's left just wondering what the hell is even happening. Then it clicks. Setsuna's power is so off the charts he can't even pilot his own body. Gideoni actually mocks him for going away from keyboard mid-fight and takes a cheap shot at his back. He's going for the critical hit, but Setsuna sidesteps it like it was in slow motion. Gideoni is just frozen, completely baffled. How did he even pull that off? Was that pure instinct? An ultra instinct moment ripped straight from a Manhwa ***. Gideoni figures if he can just pin him down, it's game over. He manages to land a solid blow on Setsuna. "Gotcha," he gloats, telling him he's not going anywhere now. He's all, "Okay, kid, gotta admit, that power level is impressive, but at the end of the day, you're just a squishy human on a dragon's playground." Gideoni raises his weapon to take Setsuna's head, ranting about how being undead is way better. But just as he's about to swing, surprise, Ela shows up to block the attack. She's all, "Sorry I'm late," and draws a line in the sand, saying Gideoni's not touching another hair on Setsuna's head. Gideoni was so tunnel-visioned he didn't even see her coming, and now he just sees another pest to swat. Ela glances at Setsuna, who's clearly checked out, still rocking the red hair and fiery aura. She has no clue what's going on with him, but she makes a promise right then and there. She's going to protect him, no matter what. Meanwhile, cut to Setsuna's mindscape. He's back in that weird, empty space with the spirit, who's immediately roasting him, calling him a pathetic human for getting overwhelmed by some weak flames. Setsuna claps back. You don't get it. He thought they were already supposed to be synced up, one and the same. And then, for a split second, he sees Isla's face. He desperately asks the spirit how to get control and return to the real world. The spirit hits him with the classic cryptic response. "Don't ask me, dude. Figure it out yourself." Turns out, this is the first time the spirit's ever loaned its power to a human. Back in the dungeon, things are not going so hot. Ila gets smacked by Gideoni's attack and hits the deck. But even as she's down, she remembers what Setsuna told her. As long as she had the will in her heart, even someone like her could get stronger. She remembers some kind words, being told not to rush things, that as long as her heart was resolved, she would absolutely grow stronger. As Ila struggles against Gideoni's assault, back in Mind Land, the spirit is getting hyped, basically munching on popcorn, wondering if it's about to see a 2-for-1 tragedy. If that's the case, the spirit muses. Then it'll be the one to personally pull the plug on Setsuna. But just as Gideoni knocks Ila to the ground for the final blow, Setsuna comes roaring back to life, unleashing the full, untamed power of the flame spirit. Unleashing a full-blown inferno of magic aimed squarely at Giddy. Setsuna is like, hey, remember that whole immortality is a blessing speech you were giving? Yeah, well, humans have a deadline, which means we actually have to grind and get better. Setsuna then has a flashback to that time he leveled up his fire spirit magic while literally on the brink of death. Giddy is screaming, that's impossible, right before Setsuna completely shuts him down. Ila, still on the mend, calls out his name, basically asking, Setsuna, is that really you? He just nods, assuring her that everything's under control now. He walks over, thanks her for having his back, and asks if she's hurt. She brushes it off, saying she's fine and just glad they're both okay. Drago, still in total shock, mutters that he never expected Ila to show up like that. She explains that the upperclassmen teleported out, but she had a gut feeling something was wrong and decided to double back. She tells them to debrief the professors who are on standby, confident that the cavalry is on its way. Then, with perfect dramatic timing, Setsuna feels something off and promptly passes out. With our 3 heroes unconscious on the floor, the rescue team finally arrives. A woman takes a look, notes that the 3 close combat students are alive, and gives them a verbal pat on the back for their efforts. Some guy helps Setsuna to his feet, explaining that Mifune filled them in on the situation, and they rushed over to help. Like a true protagonist, Setsuna immediately asks them to take care of Ila and Drago first, only to realize they're all getting carted off together. Later, Setsuna wakes up in a familiar-looking room and realizes he's back in the infirmary, commenting that he's practically a regular here. He can still feel the residual heat from the battle pulsing inside him. Just then, Lionel walks in, noticing he's awake. Before Lionel can even sit, Setsuna's already asking about the others. Lionel just chuckles, saying Setsuna was worrying about his friends even while he was in a coma for 3 whole days. He assures him that Drago and Ila are doing just fine. And yeah, their senior from the formation department is also okay. Apparently, Setsuna was the last one to wake up. Lionel then mentions he heard Setsuna went toe-to-toe with a seriously powerful enemy. He adds that the principal already handled all the political fallout from the incident. Setsuna just figures it's better not to know all the messy details. Lionel then gets serious, apologizing for that whole mess with Leo that the principal told him about. He admits there are other dangerous elements like him lurking around. Super dangerous individuals, in fact, and an internal investigation was supposed to be underway, but it got delayed by recent events, which is how they completely missed Yuvini's whole villain arc. Lionel expresses deep regret that the students were put in harm's way twice and swears up and down that it will never, ever happen again. As Lionel bows his head in a deep apology, Setsuna tells him to look up. But just as he's about to say something, a jolt of sharp pain rips through his body. Lionel steadies him, explaining it's just the aftershock of pushing his mana way past its limit, a classic side effect in any good reincarnation manhwa. But he says not to worry, since his actual wounds were already patched up with healing magic, probably thanks to the person who rushed in to treat him. Setsuna is left wondering who this mystery healer could be. Right on cue, there's a knock at the door. Lionel just smirks, speak of the devil. The door swings open to reveal Professor Zachary awkwardly holding a plate of peeled apples for Setsuna. Lionel gives Zachary a playful shove on the back. He tells him to hold his horses, but Zachary, looking dead serious, cuts in to apologize for how he treated Setsuna during the orientation test. He confesses he always looked down on the close combat department, and the most infuriating thing was seeing someone with Setsuna's talent wasting it there. Zachary then drops a backstory bomb. He used to be an honor student at this very academy, but after finding out his only path was close combat magic, his family and friends completely ditched him. So seeing Setsuna, who could have chosen any path, willingly picked this one, it seriously ticked him off. He just couldn't get why someone with so much potential would choose the hard road. That is, until a certain report landed on his desk. Not only did Setsuna's team get the top score in the joint training, but Setsuna himself set the new all-time high score for the entire Close Combat Academy, like some kind of Academy manhwa hero. Because of that insane achievement, they actually canceled the joint training with the kingdom's elite Magus battalion. The man was just too good. But Zachary wasn't just pleased. He was absolutely floored that the Close Combat department could throw down on that level. He shoots his hand out to Setsuna, basically saying, dude, that was epic. And Setsuna's just thinking, wait, is this the same guy? My first impression of him was great a jerk. So Setsuna shakes his hand, admitting he also needed to apologize and thank Zachary for the save. After a bro nod, Zachary pieces out, saying he'll see him in class. With the drama settled, Lionel slides in with a glove, saying it's a little welcome back gift from the principal. You know, These moments are why we love a good academy manhwa. And if you do too, hit that subscribe button to follow Satsuna's journey. He points out that wrapping his hand in bandages 24/7 isn't exactly a vibe. This new glove was custom made for that freaky spirit magic crest he's rocking. We're talking an ancient magic seal so old, nobody's ever seen or even heard of it. Naturally, Satsuna's like, you know about spirit magic? Lionel drops a massive lore bomb. Spirit magic is also called ancient magic, and it was the spark that ignited a massive war between mages 100 years ago. Ever since, anything related to it has been strictly forbidden. He gives Setsuna a dead serious look, telling him not to flash that power around, because if the Holy Church gets wind of it, his life is pretty much over. Satsuna's brain just blue-screened. He remembered learning about some forbidden magic from the Great Magic War a century ago, but he never dreamed it was time-specific magic. He had to ask, how in the world do you know all this? And Lionel's reply, oh, the principal gave me the full rundown on the whole evil god situation. Yeah, he knows everything. The apostles, the spirit magic, and even the tiny detail about Setsuna being a time traveler from the future. It's official. They know this is a full-blown reincarnation manhwa. Satsuna's relieved someone's in the loop, but he's also thinking, is having my entire life story known by the faculty really the best play here? Lionel just claps him on the shoulder, saying he couldn't care less what Setsuna did in a past life. All that matters now is that he's a student in the close combat department. Setsuna thanks him, then asks where the principal is. Turns out, the head honcho found a lead on the apostles and is off on a little field trip to chase it down. Satsuna's burning with curiosity, but Lionel just stands up and says he can grill the principal when he gets back. For now, his job is to rest, and once he's back on his feet, Lionel has something else to tell him. As Lionel walks out, Setsuna just stares at his hand. He replays the battle in his head. He used the spirit's power, didn't he? And it almost ended horribly. The only reason he pulled through was thanks to Isla, but he's got zero confidence he could pull that off again. He unwraps the bandages, staring at the crest on his palm and the insane power it holds. Suddenly, a voice echoes in the room, confirming his fears. You're right to be scared. Don't think a mere human can control the power of a spirit so easily. Setsuna whips his head around, thinking the spirit itself is talking, but the room is totally empty. Then, he sees a rustle under his blanket. In a blur of motion, a tiny creature zips out and plops right on top of his head, speaking in a ridiculously cheerful voice. Rejoice, for I have manifested myself. Setsuna, completely bewildered, asks, are you the spirit? The creature confirms it, acting all offended that Setsuna was so informal, and introduces himself as Blazer, telling him not to forget the name. All Setsuna can think is that this cute, fluffy form does not times match the terrifying power he just felt. Blazer then hops over to the window, gawking at the outside world like a tourist, marveling at how huge and amazing modern society looks. Setsuna deadpans, you know, that's just because you're tiny, right? Blazer replies that while human society isn't that special, it's giving him a whole new perspective, since this is his first time taking on such a small form. This gets Setsuna's attention, and he asks why Blazer chose this form. Blazer gets all high and mighty, saying he's not obligated to answer, but he'll make an exception just this once. He explains that they're linked by the crest, and to maintain his form, he needs a steady supply of mana. If he stayed in his original, epic-sized form, he'd drain a mortal like Setsuna dry in seconds. So, he took on this smaller, energy-efficient form to avoid turning our boy into a human raisin. Seeing a golden opportunity, Setsuna decides to ask the big questions, inquiring if Blazer was around for the Great Magical War 100 years ago and what exactly went down. Blazer's face totally shifted, and he hit back with a casual, honestly, don't remember the deets. Apparently, he was just on a wild rampage during his contractor's war and couldn't care less about the past. All that mattered to him was the here and now. And with that, Blazer just bolts out of the room, leaving Setsuna scrambling to follow, yelling for him to wait up. Satsuna's mind was racing if the Holy Church caught wind of an actual spirit just chilling here. They'd both be fast-tracked to a very unpleasant inquisition. If you want to see how our boy wiggles out of messes like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because the drama in this manhwa is just getting started. He had to stop Blazer before that happened, so he sprinted to catch up. By the time he got outside, Blazer was already out of the building, just scoping the place out. And of course, he was already pulling a crowd. Some students were like, is that a dog? While the girls were basically melting, calling him the cutest thing they'd ever seen. Setsuna yelled for Blazer to hold on. The little guy glanced back, looking genuinely surprised, and shot back. Dude, why are you even following me? Your body is pathetically weak. He even had the nerve to ask if Setsuna was sure times he could keep up. Setsuna just thought, oh, if my body was at 100%, you'd be eating those words right now. As Blazer took off again, Setsuna gave chase, only to run smack into Noel. And of course, Noel had to start talking trash, saying Setsuna was getting way too cocky and that his win was a total fluke. He bragged that his golems were totally upgraded now and could tank anything Setsuna threw at them. Setsuna, having zero time for this, just blew right past him. Noel, completely triggered by being ignored, just scowled as Setsuna dipped. And right on cue, Carl shows up, putting on his best noble act, and forgives Setsuna for being rude earlier. Just as Carl was about to launch into some speech about Layla, He saw Setsuna give him the exact same treatment, brutally ignoring him to keep running. This, of course, prompted Carl to whine about how disrespectful he was being. Setsuna, still not stopping, just tossed over his shoulder that he had no idea what Carl was talking about and to just drop it. Carl, predictably, was deeply offended. He just stood there muttering about Setsuna's terrible lack of respect. As Setsuna pushed onward, Silas watched the whole thing go down from the shadows. By evening, a totally gassed Setsuna finally found Blazer in a hall, forced to admit the little guy had won. Mafune spotted him, looking completely wrecked, and asked, "Whoa, what happened to you? Why are you panting like you just ran a marathon?" Nearby, one girl whispered to her friend, asking if that was the close combat mage who trained with Mafune during the joint session. The other girl nodded. She added that Setsuna only got to the top because Mifune basically carried him. Mifune overheard and immediately shut them down, telling them not to diss his friend ever again. After the girls scurried off, Mifune apologized to Setsuna, explaining that ever since he crushed the joint training exercise, the vibe had gotten super tense, even though no one knew the real story. Setsuna admitted he never thought someone like Mifune would actually consider him a friend. Mifune just replied that in his book, everyone had their uses as a friend. Setsuna deadpanned that Mafune had a pretty unique personality. Changing the subject, Mafune brought up the joint training again, specifically mentioning Yuzua, the one who fell into that trap. He said that while she wasn't in any mortal danger, the side effects were still hitting her hard, and apparently, she'd been locked up and was being grilled by the professors. Setsuna immediately wondered if Giovanni was involved, his suspicion meter going off the charts. He then asked Mifune if he'd seen a small, red thing running around. Mifune pointed and said it was heading for the courtyard. That was all Setsuna needed to hear, and he decided they needed to bounce, like, right now. Over at the courtyard, Blazer was literally just playing with flowers. The other students were all gathered around, totally fascinated, wondering what kind of animal he was and whose pet he could possibly be. Octor was also there, watching the scene and wondering if it was some kind of magical beast. Setsuna called out to Blazer, but the second Octor saw him, his face twisted in rage. He was still fuming, thinking about how that annoying brat Setsuna had managed to erase all the evidence of him rigging their last fight. Even though he'd been slick, some sharp-eyed professor had still noticed things were off. The moment he connected the dots and realized Blazer was Setsuna's pet, a nasty idea formed. Octor decided to make a scene. His plan? Accuse Setsuna of bringing a dangerous magical beast onto campus, which would give him the perfect excuse to attack it for the safety of the school. He was going to strike Blazer down, totally confident that the academy wouldn't dare punish him for his heroic precaution. Now, for a split second, Blazer actually looked concerned, but that lasted all of 2 seconds before he just casually unleashed a wave of fire, blowing the attack to smithereens. Octor was completely stunned, furiously telling Blazer to know his place. Problem was, the front of his own clothes were now a smoldering wreck, and in a flash of total humiliation, he turned and fled. Setsuna let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding, relieved that Blazer was okay. However, it didn't take long for him to realize the entire student body was staring, the gossip mill firing on all cylinders. After seeing Octor get absolutely roasted and getting a front row seat to Blazer's power trip, a wave of uh-oh washed over the crowd. I mean, if Blazer could pull off that kind of heat in his fun-sized form, what could he do at full power? One dude was practically sweating, wondering about those flames, muttering about how freaking intense they were. His buddy chimed in, like, "No way that much fire came out of that tiny thing, right?" Blazer, completely unfazed, just flicked his tail. "What? Are you all friends with that glorified hall monitor?" The students, catching the vibe, collectively decided to nope right out of there. But across the room, Ayla was locked in, watching Blazer's every move. The second Setsuna clocked her intense stare, he instinctively took a step back. She was clearly deep in thought, so naturally, Blazer piped up, "What's on your mind? You want to get toasted, too?" Setsuna's internal monologue just went, "Oh yeah, he'd totally do it." As Ayla closed the distance, Blazer smirked, commenting, "Well, look at you. Seems you're all ready for it." But instead of squaring up, Ayla dropped to one knee, thanking him for pulling Setsuna's butt out of the fire back in the dungeon, a full-on bow of gratitude for saving her precious friend. Blazer, soaking it all in, puffed out his chest. "Humph, a proper attitude. You should be grateful I even bothered linking my power to this guy." And just then, Setsuna noticed the crescent mark on Blazer's head had shifted. Ayla then reached into a basket, pulling out some fruit and offering it straight to Blazer, explaining she'd brought it for him on her way to see Setsuna. Without missing a beat, Blazer started chowing down. A worthy offering, he declared, then quickly corrected himself. "I mean, it's not terrible. Okay, fine, I love it." And Setsuna just thought, wow, this guy is surprisingly easy to tame. So now the scene is this. The whole cafeteria is having lunch, and Blazer is just chilling in Ayla's lap, happily munching away on her food. Drago casually points out, "Dude's got a crazy appetite," before asking Setsuna, "So, what kind of animal is he, anyway?" Setsuna gives the generic answer, he's a magical beast. Internally, though, he's panicking. If he spills the beans that Blazer's a spirit, the church would be all over them. And as much as he trusted Drago, he couldn't drag his friend into that mess. For now, keeping a low profile was priority number one. Besides, Blazer didn't seem like a threat to anyone at the moment. He was too busy being adorable. Seeing that the little guy had already demolished Isla's lunch, Setsuna slid his own plate over, giving Isla a grateful nod. She just stayed quiet, and it looked like maybe all the attention was making Blazer a little antsy, despite his tough act. Just then, a couple of students walked past their table. The girl whispered, "Hey, that's Setsuna, the close combat mage who aced the joint training." The guy, however, was more interested in Blazer, commenting, "I've never seen a creature like that." As Blazer dug into Setsuna's food, he smugly muttered, "Of course. An existence as magnificent as myself is bound to turn heads." He then added, "As long as it's just harmless fawning, I shall permit it." Setsuna just sighed internally. Yep, his all-powerful spirit was officially being treated like an exotic pet. Blazer then turned his attention to Ela and declared, "Continue to bring me offerings of this quality, and I shall consider making you my #1 subordinate." Setsuna couldn't help but be thankful he was the only one who could hear Blazer's ridiculous inner monologue. Shaking it off, he turned to Ela and Drago. "Hey guys, for real, thanks for having my back in that dungeon." Isla just smiled, saying, "Of course, that's what friends do." Drago, meanwhile, with his signature stoic expression, started rummaging through his bag and pulled something out. He held up an envelope, explaining that his parents heard about his killer score in the joint training. They were so stoked, they actually sent him a letter telling him how proud they were that he chose to be a close combat mage. You could see the hint of a smile on his face. Setsuna was genuinely happy for him, but then Ela broke the mood, turning to Setsuna with a serious look. "I'm worried about Giovanni," she said. "Who, or what, is he really?" Setsuna shook his head. "I don't have the full picture yet, but we should know more once they're done questioning Yuzua." His mind flashed back to their first run-in with the guy. He'd suspected Giovanni was an apostle from the start. I mean, the dude's only real trick seemed to be controlling that massive hydra, and that kind of power is basically an apostle's calling card. But before he could get lost in thought, Drago, looking dead serious, cut in. "Setsuna, I need to ask you about the power you used in the dungeon." He described the energy field Setsuna had created from his mana, pointing out that it was nothing like any close combat magic he'd ever seen. And just like that, Setsuna was cornered, totally hesitating. Unsure what to say, Ela jumped in, guessing. "It was Blazer, wasn't it? He lent you his power." Blazer, overhearing this, let out a smug little huff. "Humph, this one has a sharp eye to sense the source of such greatness." It was official. Blazer was 100% domesticated. The realization left Setsuna feeling, well, kind of speechless. He had absolutely no idea how to explain any of this. But just then, a voice cut through the tension. "Setsuna." It was Professor Silas, heading right for their table. A couple of students started whispering, wondering if Silas was about to go on another one of his infamous tirades. Hearing them, Silas just barked, "Get lost," and they vanished instantly. He then points a finger at Blazer, demanding to know what kind of creature it is, admitting he's never seen a magical beast quite like it, but at least it doesn't look like it's on the Academy's banned list. Setsuna's internal monologue is just a flashing red light of "this is bad." Silas keeps grilling him, like, "Hello? Did you just forget you have to register your pets at this academy?" Blazer, hearing himself get called a pet, gets visibly ticked off. The sheer disrespect. Silas actually clocks the reaction, thinking, wait a minute, is there a legitimate reason for this thing to be here? Because if not, he's about to call animal control. Blazer, now absolutely furious, is about to show Silas what a pet can do, but right before things get messy, Professor Zachary slides into the scene, all apologies. He's like, "My bad, totally my fault. I got the registration form, but I completely spaced on filing it." He then gives Silas a full-on apology bow. Setsuna immediately gets it. The professor is taking the heat for him. Silas is just standing there, completely stunned. He sputters that a professor is actually bowing for a student, especially for Setsuna, the former star pupil of the close combat department. You can tell Silas is dying of second-hand embarrassment. Zachary, still bowing, just calmly agrees. This is too much for Drago, who slams a table and marches right over to Zachary. But instead of getting mad, he throws an arm around Zachary with a huge grin, shouting that the only reason their department aced the joint training was all thanks to this absolute legend of a professor. At that cue, Setsuna and Isla rush over to Zachary to pile on the praise. Setsuna gives him a sincere thank you, while Ela admits that even though his methods are a bit wild, he knows it was all for them. Zachary, absolutely eating it up, starts getting all theatrical. He's putting on a show of being moved, but he's clearly loving the attention. Silas, looking like he's about to explode, mutters about what kind of ridiculous nonsense this is and if they seriously expect him to buy it. Some girl in the crowd leans over to her friend and spills the tea, whispering that the close combat department is actually ranked higher than Silas's department now. The guy replies, "Oh, that explains why he's being so extra." Silas, who apparently has super hearing, finally snaps. He just yells at them to get the stupid paperwork submitted by the next morning and storms off. Setsuna lets out a huge sigh of relief, knowing he just narrowly avoided a disaster. He realized Blazer was one insult away from going nuclear, but thankfully, it didn't get there. He thanks Zachary again for the clutch save, especially since the professor had no clue what was going on but still had their backs. Zachary just smiles and says he should be the one thanking Setsuna. He adds that, considering everything, he was positive there was a good reason for bringing the magical beast. Drago just looks on in admiration, saying Zachary is the role model all the other professors need. Isla couldn't agree more, but Blazer, completely over the sappy moment, dismisses it all as useless chatter. With that, he and Setsuna dip out. As they're walking, a messenger bird swoops down with a scroll. Setsuna opens it to find a letter congratulating him on awakening his spirit magic, but it also comes with a warning. Turns out, the principal is worried Setsuna is going to struggle to control his new powers while he's still recovering. He'd love to teach him personally, but he's swamped, so he's arranged for a substitute teacher to handle the training in his place. Setsuna is left wondering who this mystery person could possibly be. The letter continues, saying Ila will be the one to make the introductions. The principal signs off with a good luck, and Setsuna feels a wave of gratitude. And scene. We cut to a house where an old woman is reading a letter with a look of pure disgust. She scoffs, muttering about what a load of garbage she's reading, all while a young girl quietly sweeps the floor nearby. The old lady is complaining about having to teach some random kid how to use spirit magic. She's absolutely furious the principal shared her secret techniques without even asking. She adds that even though the Setsuna kid has the principal's stamp of approval, if he turns out to be useless, she won't go easy on him. This is the kind of hardcore mentor you see in the best reincarnation manhwa. If he's a disappointment, she's going to deal with him personally. Then we hard cut to an urgent magic conference where Principal Dan is dropping some major bombshells he's uncovered. After his report, some guy has the audacity to ask if he seriously thinks that's going to be enough to solve the problem. So Danhan's desperately trying to warn the Magic Council about an evil god and his entourage of dark apostles, and one guy is actually like, whoa, this sounds serious. But of course, there's always one. A lady just shuts him down, demanding concrete evidence. Danhan basically throws his hands up, retorting that the whole point times of these bad guys is that they don't leave a paper trail, which is exactly why he needs their help. You know, if you love seeing protagonists get stonewalled like this, you should probably subscribe, because this story is full of it. But the council's not having it. Some can't accept it, and another dude even has the nerve to suggest Danhan's just losing his memory. Seriously. After that train wreck of a meeting, Danhan ducks outside to meet Lion, complaining about what an absolute circus that was. Lionel, who's also there, just deadpans. Yeah, what'd you expect? Danhan slumps into a chair, admitting that, okay, he gets why they don't believe him. Lionel points out that they're talking about forbidden spirit magic. After all, it's not exactly something you bring up over brunch. Danhan fires back that you can't just ignore it's happening, and if those apostles finally decide to get off their butts, his plan is at least better than nothing. Switching topics, Danhan asks for an update on Setsuna. Lionel says the kid's recovering well, but he's still pushing himself way too hard. It's going to be a minute before he's back at 100%. Danhan just smirks, noting that Satsuna's new teacher is going to be super strict. He's just hoping the kid makes a full recovery before getting thrown into that boot camp. Meanwhile, in another part of the castle, Setsuna is passed out in his room. Carol is sitting right there, watching over him like a guardian angel. He wakes up, totally startled to see her, and blurts out why she's there. She just smiles, saying she heard he was under the weather and brought some food to speed things up. As she starts unpacking the bento boxes, she casually mentions it's a recipe Drago taught her. Setsuna, ever the gentleman, thanks her, adding a special shout-out for taking care of his spirit partner, Blazer, since yesterday. Carol just waves it off, saying it was no biggie and that she and Isla took him for a walk around town. She even brought some fruit for Blazer, gushing about how his voice is so adorable, like a little pew sound. Setsuna finally understands why everyone is obsessed with his tiny dragon. Carol then starts raving about how incredible Ila is, saying she treated Blazer without an ounce of fear or hostility. Satsuna's like, wait, for real? And Carol doubles down, confirming Ila handled it like it was the most natural thing in the world. She points out that being able to interact with someone without putting up those mental walls is a huge deal, especially with something so intense. And since Carol's always with her own phantom beasts, she can totally sense how much they appreciate that kind of genuine kindness. Setsuna just sighs. Yeah, that's Ila for you. He thinks about how she's been looking out for him ever since that whole dungeon incident. He realizes he can't just be the guy who needs saving all the time. The second his body is good to go, he's diving headfirst into learning how to wield spirit magic. Just then, Carol packs up the rest of the food, announces she's leaving for class, and tells him to make sure he and Blazer come back. As she walks out, Satsuna's mind is already spinning. With Carol and Isla on Blazer's sitting duty, he's got to absorb every scrap of information he can find about spirit magic. He remembers reading that about 200 years ago, a massive war broke out. The followers of some big shot tried to control all the other mages, and the two sides went at it across the continents. The power of this outside magic was apparently off the charts, but only a select few mages could actually use it, and in the end, the good guys won, leaving the world in a state of fragile peace. Now, if an ancient magic user is even discovered, they're immediately interrogated and purged, and the knowledge itself is considered way too dangerous to be public, which is precisely why Setsuna has to keep his contract with Blazer a top-tier secret. He leans back, realizing that in his past life, spirit magic wasn't even on the radar. If he can actually get this power under control, he'll be one giant leap closer to taking down the evil god. But then he starts spiraling, thinking about all the ways his current life has gone off script. It's a classic *** reincarnation Manhwa *** problem. The showdown with Leo during the exchange match, Giovanni's berserker rage during joint training, none of that was in the original script of his life. If history is already changing this much, is he even making the right calls? A few days later, Setsuna is fully healed and geared up for his big training arc with Lionel, a staple of every great *** academy Manhwa ***. Carol looks pretty bummed, asking if he's absolutely sure about this. He just nods, reminding her it's happening during the academy's vacation. Drago gets all pumped, declaring he's going to train like a madman so he doesn't get left in the dust by Setsuna. Our hero just smirks and says he's looking forward to the competition. Isla, however, is just sad. She'll be separated from Blazer and is already complaining about how lonely she'll be. Blazer, smooth as ever, just tells her to have a mountain of fruit waiting for him when he gets back. So after a heartfelt goodbye that was straight out of an academy manhwa, Setsuna is finally hitting the road, but not before getting some last-minute well wishes from Carol and Isla. Lionel, ever the observer, points out that Setsuna's got some solid friends, and our boy can't disagree. But his real worry isn't the journey ahead. It's his little buddy Blazer. He's stressing about being a single parent to a magical creature, because let's be real, he can't just keep pawning him off on Isla forever. The duo finally rolls up to the fantasy world's version of a bus station, ready to tackle a seriously long trip. Setsuna, ever the adventurer, suggests they hop on one of the giant lizard carriages. Lionel's quick to point out that these things are less luxury coach and more bucking bronco. Still, it's the best option for going the distance, since your only job is to cling on for dear life. The owner, who looks like he's seen a thing or two, gives them the standard spiel. They're fast, the ride's gonna suck, and if you fall off and break something, that's a you problem, not a me problem. Setsuna just shrugs it off, radiating that main character energy. He figures he can just vibe with the giant reptile, and everything will be cool. And what do you know? He hops on the lizard as easily as getting into an Uber, thinking if he just plays it cool, the lizard will too. He settles in, casually noting that it feels totally fine. The owner is absolutely floored, starts slow clapping, and apologizes for judging the kid. Apparently, most people start out by getting launched into the nearest wall. Of course, this is a classic reincarnation manhwa moment. Setsuna's done this before, just in a different lifetime. As they take off, even Blazer is having the time of his life. Setsuna glances over at Lionel, who's looking a little green around the gills, and asks if he's getting motion sick. Lionel just grumbles that he's not used to it, but their road trip gets interrupted. Up ahead, 3 women armed to the teeth are blocking the road, and they are not giving off friendly local vibes. Lionel's gut was right. These aren't your average highway robbers. One of the women confirms it, introducing them as the Jabberdess, servants of the witch Morgana, a name Setsuna immediately recognizes from the principal's cryptic letter. The woman then locks eyes with him, calling him out as a spirit magic magus. Lionel tries to play it cool, saying they're actually on their way to meet her. He asks if they're the welcome wagon, but then one of the women's voices completely changes, becoming cold and arrogant. She sneers that she has zero interest in some mere close combat mage. The sudden personality swap is so jarring that Lionel immediately questions if she's even Morgana's servant. Setsuna hops off his ride, trying to process what's happening. Lionel leans in and whispers the big reveal. Dude, these aren't human. And just like that, it all clicks for Setsuna. They're facing off against alchemically crafted dolls, magical murder bots. The lead doll scoffs at Setsuna, saying a spirit probably just chose him by accident. And then comes the challenge. If I'm wrong, prove it. Beat us. Before he can even formulate a witty comeback, they charge. One doll lunges, and Setsuna's sword is up in a flash, blocking the blow. Meanwhile, Lionel has his lizard do a tactical retreat before he counters with a bone-shattering punch. Setsuna's brain is already in overdrive, calculating that if the minions are this juiced up, their master must be on a whole other level. The doll just smirks. She taunts him, saying he's struggling just like she expected, and that she's not about to give a close combat guy free lessons on spirit magic. Lionel, completely fed up with the trash talk, decides he's had enough. He summons a ridiculously huge sword, basically saying, "Oh, you want to get serious? Let's get serious." Setsuna realizes this is the entrance exam from hell. To even meet Morgana, he has to dismantle her welcoming committee first. Lionel confirms they're out of options. It's time to fight. The dolls immediately launch a massive ball of magical energy their way, and our boys barely have time to react. But Lionel yells not to dodge, but to push through. He gives the signal, then slices clean through the attack, and Setsuna gets a first-hand look at just how insane that sword is. A new voice, presumably Morgana's, comments that they're not half bad. As if on cue, the 3 dolls rush in for another round. This time, their weapons are crackling with lightning. One of them swings at Setsuna, who dodges with inches to spare. Another unleashes a blast of black lightning, forcing both of them to leap for cover. As the 3rd doll winds up, Lionel shouts a warning. He yells that if that attack connects, they're getting fried. Setsuna gets the message loud and clear, diving out of the way just as electricity spiders across the ground. From afar, Morgana watches, thinking this is her standard test. If they can't handle a little elemental pressure, they'll just be another pair of mages who couldn't cut it. Setsuna was racking his brain, trying to solve the age-old problem. Why do brawling mages get absolutely wrecked by elemental attacks? If a spell lands, their bodies take the full hit, while casters who project their mana get off easy. It's a no-brainer why melee mages just can't tank that kind of damage. Morgana chimed in from the peanut gallery, pointing out that even modern-day magus armies use golems or summoned creatures as their frontline meat shields. She basically called close combat mages dinosaurs, claiming Setsuna and Lionel stood zero chance against her dogs in a brawl. But Setsuna shot back, saying, yeah, maybe they're out of fashion, but that doesn't mean they're useless. He dodged, closing the distance to one of the women, muttering that close-quarters magic definitely still has its place in the world. And to prove his point, he landed a haymaker that would make a heavyweight champ proud. Meanwhile, Lionel was dancing with the second woman, and the second he saw an opening, he tagged her in the back, clarifying that he just put her on Do Not Disturb mode, not deleted her entirely. As the maids kept swarming Setsuna, Lionel was playing a high-stakes game of dodgeball with magic. Setsuna zoned in, focusing pure power into his fist. His mind raced, visualizing the most OP weapon he could possibly cook up in this chaotic situation. When one of the maids swung at him, he vaulted into the air, used a nearby tree branch like a springboard, and delivered a devastating kick from behind. Morgana, watching this whole acrobatic display, noted that he was literally changing his weapon's structure on the fly and using the environment like a pro. Lionel, not to be outdone, was still holding his own against another one of the battle maids. Setsuna realized his moves were perfectly setting up his buddy Lionel. This is that next-level synergy you see in the best academy manhwa, where a perfectly toned body, slick technique, and mana control make it all happen. If they play their cards right, they're anything but weak up close. An attack slammed into the ground right where Lionel was, forcing him to leap back. The three women then joined hands, and Morgana sent a telepathic message that basically said, your cheap shots are done. She was practically taunting them, wondering how they'd ever break through pure elemental magic at point-blank range. The maids conjured a massive orb of magic, and Setsuna figured if it wasn't a direct homing attack, he could probably shatter it with a charged shot. However, he knew its power would be seriously nerfed by their water magic. Then, out of nowhere, Blazer's voice popped into his head, claiming that breaking the spell was child's play. He bragged that if they used his power, they might accidentally delete the entire forest. Suddenly, Setsuna's elemental magic roared to life, energy flaring around him like a supernova. Blazer was gassing him up, impressed he kept his cool, and announced he was cranking up the heat to barbecue them all. As Blazer amped up the power, Setsuna felt a searing pain and screamed for him to hold up. Blazer hit the brakes, totally confused. Dude, what gives? Don't you want to wipe the floor with these three? Setsuna shot back that yeah, he wanted to win, but this was a test of his time's strength. Blazer called him ridiculous. And just then, the magic barrier just vanished. Morgana ordered her maids to bring Setsuna to her. Lionel was just standing there, utterly bewildered. The women, now suddenly polite, apologized for being rough and asked him to come with them. A few minutes later, they arrive at a massive mansion where Morgana is waiting next to some girl. She calls out Setsuna's name, and it clicks for him that this is the real Morgana. He immediately grilled him, asking why he never used his spirit magic. Against a shield made of pure water, his fists were useless, and banking on them meant he was set up to fail the test. Setsuna admitted she was 100% right, but explained that his spirit magic is his ultimate trump card, something he has to keep under wraps at all costs. That's why he wasn't about to whip it out against some enemies he'd just met. Besides, if he had actually used his spirit magic back there, the whole forest would have gone up in smoke, and he wasn't down to commit eco-terrorism and harm a bunch of animals just to pass some test. Morgana straight up told him he was too soft, but she then praised him for not being a total moron and unleashing a power he clearly couldn't control yet. If he had, he would have failed instantly. However, she then offered to be his guide and teach him how to master it. Setsuna, recognizing a golden opportunity, bowed his head in gratitude. Blazer, however, was having none of it, thinking, her? Control ME? Is this a joke? It was, in fact, not a joke. Morgana replied, saying that while Setsuna had potential, from where she was standing, he was still just an unrefined animal. Blazer snapped back. Oh, I'll show you my true form, lady. He started to get bigger, and Setsuna felt a horrifying drain as Blazer began to forcibly siphon mana straight from his body. Blazer went full-on pyromaniac, vowing to charbroil everything down to her very bones. Setsuna immediately panicked, realizing he had absolutely zero control over this walking inferno. If this kept up, the whole forest was going to be nothing but a pile of ash. But Morgana, cool as a cucumber, just reminded him that no other humans lived out here, which, made her pest control problem a lot simpler. Still, she wasn't about to let Blazer torch her backyard. With that, she summoned her own spirit, announcing it was time to show Setsuna how a real-time's spirit contract works. Blazer chucked a fireball at her, but the moment it hit, Morgana's body dissolved into water and reformed like it was nothing. She declared playtime was officially over. Tapping into her power, she pulled a colossal wave straight from the lake, leaving Lionel completely gobsmacked. The water slammed into Blazer, snuffing out his flames like a cheap candle. Morgana explained that the spirit's bond with Setsuna was paper thin, which meant its power was basically a firecracker trying to be a nuke. It was nothing more than a wild animal. But if Setsuna could forge a times true times bond with his spirit, he'd be able to toggle its power and form on and off like a light switch. He just stood there, pondering what it would be like to have that kind of mastery over nature. After the dust settled, Morgana dropped the tutorial. There are 3 stages to mastering spirit magic. Stage 1 is becoming one with nature. Stage 2 is being able to pop into the spirit world whenever you want. And Stage 3, confronting your spirit and earning its actual respect. She'd heard Setsuna basically forced his contract without even clearing the first stage, which isn't how you do it in a proper manhwa, which is why his magic was so janky. Morgana, completely fed up, started roasting Dam, calling him a brat for failing to teach Setsuna the basics. Setsuna was floored. Did she just call the freaking headmaster a times brat asterisk? Morgana then revealed the forest was basically a spirit hotspot, making it the perfect place to reach a state of total zen. And just like that, starting tomorrow, Setsuna's training arc was officially on. Morgana told him to show her exactly what qualities made a top-tier spirit choose a rookie like him. He agreed, and the next day, she watched him meditating in the woods. He didn't just practice all day, he also helped with chores and kept the house spotless. Then, one night, while he was training by the lake, a bunch of glowing lights started floating down around him. He knew instantly he was vibing with nature itself. Staring up at the house on the cliff, he muttered to himself that he was finally ready for round 2 with Blazer. Back inside, everyone gathered around. Morgana noted that Setsuna had sensed the spirits and hit this stage in just 2 weeks, which was ridiculously fast. Kids on that classic reincarnation manhwa protagonist schedule. She explained that the next step was to dive into the spirit world and make that bond legit. The catch? In the spirit world, magic is useless. It's all about your raw, inner clout. And even though Setsuna could now see spirits, facing Blazer alone would be a total wipeout. So, Morgana decided she was coming with him as his overpowered chaperone. Blazer admitted this was an unusual development, but he was still skeptical, basically asking Morgana if she really thought she could challenge him on his home turf. She shot back, warning Setsuna not to get a big head. Setsuna calmly replied that all he needed was for Blazer to finally give him the nod. Morgana then turned to Lionel. She laid it out. While they were in the spirit world, their physical bodies would be completely defenseless, and this was their secret base, after all. Protected by their crew, she put Lionel in charge of their safety. Lionel gave a firm nod, promising he and the others would guard their away from keyboard bodies with their lives. Morgana said it was go time and told Setsuna to first hit that state of total selflessness. Once he did, the portal to the spirit world would open. Setsuna did as he was told, and when he opened his eyes, bam! He was standing face to face with Blazer, with Morgana right there beside him. Morgana admitted that Blazer's massive ego wasn't just for show. Now that Setsuna could properly perceive spirits, he finally understood the terrifying scale of Blazer's power. Blazer, noticing the kid's newfound clarity, smirked, commenting that it looked like Morgana was finally taking this a bit more seriously. She then threw up a barrier, explaining it was to protect Blazer's consciousness. She warned that if Setsuna faced him head-on, his soul might get left behind in the spirit world forever. Blazer just scoffed. He told Morgana not to get ahead of herself, questioning if she seriously thought she could control his power with such a weak determination. Setsuna, absolutely livid, claps back that he's grinded on magic control more than literally anyone. And since spirit power is basically the same operating system with a different look, yeah, he's already mastered it. Now that he's reached that main character state of Zen, he's convinced nothing can stop him. If he wants Blazer's seal of approval, though, there's still one more insane hoop to jump through. Blazer just warns him, "Don't come crying to me when you regret this." Meanwhile, back in the real world, Lionel and some girl are watching the whole light show from a safe distance. Lionel's just like, "Yep, looks like he's starting," totally confident Setsuna's got this in the bag. But then, his plot dart starts going off. A seriously dark power is approaching. And we're not talking mildly evil, we're talking apocalypse-level malicious. It's making a beeline for their hideout, and at a time like this, he absolutely cannot let anyone interrupt Setsuna's final exam with Blazer. And right on cue, some dude named Leo, practically dripping with a dark aura, waltzes into the room and has the nerve to ask, "Yo, anybody home?" His eyes lock onto Lionel, and he casually wonders if he's from the punch first, ask questions later department. Then, plot twist, he spots Setsuna, which apparently saves him a trip. Lionel, however, instantly recognizes Leo. He points out that this is the runaway student they've been searching for. Small world, huh? The missing kid just decided to deliver himself. But before they can process that, another guy, Zan, busts through the wall like the Kool-Aid Man. After trashing the decor, he smacks a doll and calls them his rookie, then announces his master plan. He's kidnapping both the old lady and Setsuna. Leo, who clearly missed this part of the briefing, is stunned. He reminds Zagan, "Dude, we were best friends," and then tries to negotiate. "Can't you just settle for the old lady and the doll?" It finally clicks for Lionel that Zagan is also times one of the big bad apostles. He grimaces, realizing they've shown up at the absolute worst possible time. He even admits that if he weren't a teacher, he would have bounced already. Leo, sensing the "I'd rather be anywhere else" vibe, tells Lionel he's free to go, since he's not on their hit list. But Lionel, in a classic Academy Manhwa moment, refuses to back down and summons a whole-ass swordsman out of thin air. He tells Leo not to mock him, delivering the epic line that in their times Academy, no teacher ever abandons a student. With that mic drop, he charges straight into the fray. Back in the spirit dimension, Blazer is telling Morgana her tough guy act is just empty words. All the while, Setsuna's internal monologue is just a loop of don't get distracted, focus, focus. Because in this world, willpower is everything, and he needs his to be unbreakable right now. But then he glances at Morgana, completely lost, like, what is happening? She drops the bad news. Stuff is hitting the fan in the real world. A nasty Uli presence is invading the forest, and it looks like her personal bodyguards have already been wiped out. Setsuna is obviously concerned, but tells Morgana to go handle it. Morgana hits him with a serious reality check, warning him that if she drops the protective barrier, Setsuna could get incinerated by pure spirit energy and might never be able to log back into the real world, but our boy just shrugs it off, saying this is a trial he has to face alone. He just tells her to go take care of the teacher and the others. Even Blazer, the giant spirit god, chimes in, telling Setsuna to get back here. He basically says it's not worth dying after all the top-tier coaching he's received. Setsuna just gives a cool, I'll be back, and seeing that protagonist-level determination, Morgana drops the barrier. He turns to Blazer and apologizes for the holdup. Blazer immediately cuts to the chase and asks why Setsuna is so damn desperate to get his hands on his power. He points out that it's way beyond his current level and asks if he's really willing to burn himself out for it. Setsuna hits back with the core of his reincarnation manhwa trauma. He already lost everything once before his regression. That makes Blazer pause. It dawns on him that this place isn't just a place, it's the literal landscape of Setsuna's mind. Setsuna continues, explaining that the apostles played the magic army like puppets, and the world was so broken it couldn't be fixed. All of his mentors were taken from him, and that immense regret is what triggered the time spirit's power to send him back for a round 2. And now, he swears he's not going to let anyone take anything from him ever again. Blazer is totally captivated, wondering if this is all just a revenge quest against the guys who broke the world. Or maybe it's something more. He actually finds this raw human drive. Beautiful. But let's be honest, facing that level of despair head-on without even flinching? That's pure madness. And this Setsuna kid is definitely an interesting one. Blazer finally admits that Setsuna is worthy of a real trial, but what he wants isn't just a piece of his power. He wants the whole damn thing. With that, Blazer shifts into a smaller, more human-like form and announces that the tutorial is over. This isn't going to be a test like the others. This is a trial designed and administered by Blazer himself. Setsuna figures it's a clash of wills and immediately rushes into attack. Blazer meets his energy, ready for a fight, and they both throw down, their spirit fists colliding in a massive explosion of energy. As that epic showdown kicks off, we cut back to the real world, where Lionel is still locked in a desperate battle with Zagan. He actually manages to clip one of Zagan's feathers, and Zan's just like, not bad, for a human. But as they're trading blows, Zan picks up on some alchemy magic and suddenly launches himself into the air, screaming for everyone to scatter. And just as Zan's about to land the final blow, bam, a freaking doll intercepts the hit like a Secret Service agent taking one for the president. Morgana then yeets Leo clear of the house, literally busting through a wall to escape the fallout. Lionel's thinking, okay, after dropping bombs like that over and over, Zan has got to be running on fumes, so why the hell is his mana getting even beefier? Zan, totally reading his mind, just smirks and tells him not to slack off now. Lionel's like, fine by me, and winds up for another go, but Morgana jumps in, throwing up a magic shield to block him. She then casually asks if they could maybe not demolish someone else's property. Realizing Morgana's finally back in the game, Lionel basically begs for a timeout. Her response? Nah, the youngins need to struggle a bit more. Builds character. Just as Zan gears up to attack her, Lionel dives in, sword swinging. Zan, using that weird power of his, just parries the strike, and Morgana sees the blade get straight up atomized. Leo's having a major dumb moment, realizing this is that spirit magic from the intel reports and mentally kicking herself for not seeing how useless it was sooner. Zan's about to strike again when Lionel throws a haymaker, but Zan just sidesteps, telling him to keep his boy on a tighter leash. Zan then lands a clean shot on Lionel, sending him flying clean out of the building. Morgana, analyzing Zan's moves, is trying to figure out if his power is basically an anti-magic cheat code that lets him phase through any attack. She's wondering if it's some special technique or if there's a specific trigger for it. Her new plan? Hit him with magic at point-blank range. The idea is he won't have time to react, making the attack stick. So she starts pulling a Moses, whipping the entire lake into a massive, swirling tsunami bomb ready to drop. Outside, Leo spots Morgana's play coming from underground, but he's not even sweating it as he throws up his own defenses. He figures if this doesn't work, she's got no choice but to play her ace. Meanwhile, Morgana raises the water even higher, planning to just engulf and drown them both in one move. Leo, picking up on her vibe, just comments that it's a bit overkill, but hey, not a bad strategy. He then unleashes his own power, slamming it right into the tidal wave. The whole thing just explodes, turning into a torrential downpour. He smugly adds that he's been doing a little training himself. Morgana is actually impressed. She's wondering if he just combined long-range magic with his disintegration ability. Leo confirms it, asking if that's a good enough parting gift for his trip to the afterlife. With that, he powers up for the final blow, announcing his mission is a wrap. But before he can even launch the attack, plot twist, Setsuna blitzes in out of nowhere and decks him with a solid punch. Morgana gets it instantly. Setsuna must have taken down the spirit. Lana just watches as Setsuna, now cloaked in a raging inferno, expertly keeps the flames from torching the entire forest. Zagan spots Setsuna and notes that this guy is a whole different beast compared to Leo. Blazer just wonders if they're even worthy opponents to get fired up about at this point. Setsuna, with pure grit in his eyes, declares they're definitely strong, but that's no reason to get cocky. Blazer thinks back to their last fight, admitting Setsuna won, but this whole humble shtick he's got going on now, it just doesn't fit him. Setsuna then reminds Blazer of their brawl back in the spirit world. Blazer landed a punch that sent him staggering. They were both totally gassed, but Blazer couldn't help but admire Setsuna's insane willpower. He remembers that even though Setsuna was shaking like a leaf, he just kept on smiling. His face was a mess, but his eyes were locked in, absolutely convinced he was going to win. Blazer, prepping his next move, scoffs that Setsuna has some serious nerve for such a frail human. Setsuna fires back that Blazer's definitely strong, which is why he's never lost. But that incredible power is also his biggest blind spot. Blazer's like, "What are you even talking about?" And Setsuna explains that he's eaten dirt and tasted despair more times than he can count, a classic setup for any reincarnation manhwa protagonist. But see, when you've already hit rock bottom, the only way to go is up, and you learn how to climb. No matter how bad it gets, his spirit won't shatter, and that sheer force of will is going to carry him to victory. He gets ready to strike, declaring that today is the day Blazer tastes his first ever loss. Blazer gets to his feet, roaring back that it's going to be Setsuna's times last, times defeat, and with everything they've got, they collide. A moment later, all Blazer can think is, damn, this kid is strong, finally admitting that Setsuna had completely blown his expectations out of the water. He had to hand it to him. Setsuna had won, leaving him wondering when the heck his boy got strong enough to guarantee a victory. Setsuna just explained that in the heat of the fight, his own willpower started surging, and Blazer's insane resolve felt like a literal bonfire that started pouring right into him. Blazer had a classic aha moment, finally getting it, and gave Setsuna the ultimate sign of respect, acknowledging him as a worthy ally, someone he could finally trust with his power. He told Setsuna to take his hand, they shared an epic fist bump, and Setsuna thanked him for the power-up. Blazer was all no thanks necessary, dude, and just told him to go handle business. Setsuna gave a firm nod, wasting no more time, and turned to face Zan head-on. Agonal shouted a warning, telling Setsuna to watch out for Zan's claws. Setsuna shot back, already knowing they drain the magic out of anything they touch. And here's the classic reincarnation manhwa plot twist. Setsuna remembered fighting this dude before his do-over. Zan's special power was literally Devourer of All, meaning he could not only cancel attack magic, but also straight-up steal the mana of anyone he managed to slice. This wasn't just some random goon. Zagan was the monster who single-handedly wrecked the entire Northern Kingdom, a nation famous for its top-tier alchemy tech, all while slurping up their magic power like a milkshake. Zan picked up on the fact that Setsuna knew his whole gimmick, basically saying, "Not sure how you know my secret, but it won't save you." Meanwhile, Leo, trying to get his act together, winced from his injuries and muttered that Setsuna had gotten way, way faster. Setsuna was actually impressed Leo was still standing, guessing he must have used magic integration to soften the blow. It was clear Leo had gotten a power boost of his own. Zan told Leo, "I'll take it from here," basically telling him to grab some popcorn and watch. Leo just agreed and stepped back to see how it would play out. Setsuna recalled that in his previous timeline, he'd beaten Zan by cheesing him with long-range magic, but this time was different. Zan was a monster up close. One solid hit could be a one-way ticket to the afterlife. But plot twist, Setsuna had also leveled up. He parried Zan's strike and slammed a punch into his side, actually making Zagan stumble back. But Setsuna didn't give him a second to breathe, immediately pressing the attack. Zan, totally floored, yelled that it was impossible for Setsuna to be faster than him. Internally, Setsuna knew his new speed was thanks to combining Blazer's power with his own physical enhancements. From the sidelines, Leo pieced it together. Setsuna was blending close-quarters combat with spirit magic. This insane combo allowed him to move at blistering speeds and just relentlessly hammer Zan with a flurry of hits. Morgana was just stunned, wondering how Setsuna mastered such precise control over his fire attacks so quickly. It was seriously impressive. That's when Zan unleashed a deafening roar that sent a shockwave of pressure through the area. He then sneered at Setsuna, saying that wrapping himself in flames was basically just asking to get eaten. Zan boasted that he could feel all that juicy power, because you know, he's the devourer of all things. Setsuna just grinned, thinking to himself, "I'm curious about that, too." Then, Zan lunged forward and scored a hit. But it was all part of the plan. Setsuna took the hit to position himself near the tree. As Zan swung again, Setsuna dodged flawlessly. And that's when Zan suddenly felt like his insides were being barbecued. He screamed at Morgana to hit him with some water magic, stat, but then his body locked up solid, and he had no idea what was happening. Setsuna calmly broke it down for him, explaining that, just as he suspected, Zan couldn't actually digest spirit magic properly. Even if he absorbed it, it was useless if his body couldn't handle it. In fact, it was eating him alive from the inside. Turns out, spirit power isn't something a creature like Zan can just gobble up without consequences. Zan roared at Setsuna, accusing him of setting him up. He then whipped around to Leo, demanding he use his power to get this volatile magic out of him. Leo, with maximum sarcasm, shot back, "Oh, really? Because I seem to remember you telling me to stay back and watch, but now you want my help? How convenient." And then, Leo didn't help, he attacked Zan. Zan was completely baffled, having no clue what was going on. The attack even caught Morgana in the crossfire, and that's when it finally clicked for Zan. Leo had betrayed them. Leo just shrugged, saying he was just prioritizing the mission, and that he took out Morgana because his so-called superior was completely useless. He added that Zan's super sniffer was useful for tracking Morgana, but his whole feral personality had gotten on his last nerve. So, Leo simply did what had to be done. Completely enraged, Zan howled that he'd never forgive Leo and promised to take everyone down with him. For his master, he would slaughter them all. And as Zan geared up for a final, desperate attack, Setsuna went full-on anime protagonist, unleashing a devastating Inferno Slash. Zagan's genius countermove, spitting a rock at it. Spoiler alert, the rock lost. Zagan got absolutely vaporized, leaving behind a shiny black gem like a video game loot drop. Setsuna scanned the area for Leo, but surprise, the coward had already bounced. He muttered Leo's name, basically adding him to his personal hit list. Next time, there would be zero chill. But just as he was having his epic revenge moment, Morgana collapsed. Setsuna scrambled to her side, promising a stat boost healing spell. But she hit him with the bad news. The enemy used disintegration magic, and her body was a total write-off. The mood instantly tanked as both Lionel and Setsuna processed the gut punch. Morgana, pulling off a tragically beautiful smile, told them not to be sad. She gave Setsuna the ultimate nod, calling him the chosen warrior of the spirit flame and saying she had one last thing for him. She handed over a strange tool that literally contained her spirit, like some kind of metaphysical flash drive. She claimed it would help him understand the speed of water in the sea, and with that, she entrusted it to him. Setsuna, completely rattled, begged her to stop talking like she was in her final cutscene. He was in total denial, refusing to believe it was game over. But it was too late. Morgana was gone. Setsuna gently laid her down, his heart feeling like an anvil. He whispered to himself the classic protagonist line, "What's the point of all this power if I can't protect anyone?" And right on cue, Lionel stepped in for the pep talk. He tried to drop some wisdom, explaining that life is totally random and nobody knows what's coming. Even the strongest dudes aren't invincible. "Humans are flawed, man," he said. "The real win is just getting back up. As long as you're breathing, you gotta keep fighting." Lionel really hoped the message was getting through. But just as the moment got super heavy, some girl just walked up and patted Setsuna on the head. She cheekily told him he'd been tricked and that saying stuff like keepsake is bad juju. Then, she dropped the bombshell. "I'm the times, real times, Morgana." Both Setsuna and Lionel's jaws hit the floor. Morgana explained that the old lady they'd been hanging with was just an alchemical doll, basically a fancy robot servant. But this one was special. Morgana had her actual soul embedded in the doll, which is why it had all her emotions and crazy powers. Then, she started roasting Setsuna. She called him a total fool, saying this was a rookie mistake. Lionel, still trying to reboot his brain, was like, "Wait, so the grandma was just a decoy?" "Yup," Morgana confirmed, calling the doll an alchemist's masterpiece. She smugly asked if they were surprised by the big reveal. You bet they were. Setsuna, still buffering, admitted he'd never seen a doll so lifelike, pointing out that even in the spirit world, she'd kept up the grandma act. Morgana just shrugged. "In the spirit world, you can change your avatar whenever you want." Lionel, still skeptical, shot back. "Isn't it a bit much to just say times your Morgana?" So she did the classic fantasy reveal, pulling back her hair to show off pointy elf ears. She explained elves live way longer than humans, and then hit Setsuna with the dreaded guess my age question. Lionel, being a terrible friend, immediately threw Setsuna under the bus, saying, "You go, you're good at this." Setsuna, however, was no idiot. He knew it was a trap with no right answer and immediately noped out. Morgana just laughed and spilled it. She was 300 years old, Setsuna deadpanned. "So we're not using digits," then connected the dots, asking if she was around for the Great Magic War. Morgana gave him a sly smile. "You interested in the war?" she asked, adding that the info would cost him. Setsuna, always ready for a deal, said he had some winnings to trade. Morgana chuckled, telling him to relax. "It's not about money," she said, "but it's definitely not safe to talk about it here." She suggested they head to a lake to discuss the erased history in private. The second they got there, Morgana started skipping stones. Or rather, she tried to jump across on them. When the third one sank, she got super mad about failing to break some 90-year record. Setsuna turned to Lionel and asked, "Is it just me, or is she completely unhinged?" Lionel immediately confirmed he was on the same page. He guessed she must be under a ton of stress. Morgana let out a sigh and finally got back to business, starting the lore dump with, "So, as you know, the world is inhabited by all kinds of different races. So, picture this. A world jam packed with humans, dwarves, beastmen, and all the usual suspects. But then you've got the elves, rocking lifespans so long they're basically eternal. These guys were the original nature lovers, always chilling in the woods and vibing with spirits, which is how they got so good at spirit magic. Now, the elves and spirits, who humans sometimes put on a pedestal, weren't always the good guys. Turns out, some of them got a little too high on their own supply and went rogue. One of these power-tripping elves basically brainwashed a king who worshipped him, started teaching his fan club spirit magic, and then launched a full-blown world domination tour. Setsuna's brain is clicking, like, wait, is this the legendary Great Magic War? Lionel chimes in, saying, yeah, blind faith plus insane power is a recipe for disaster. Morgana keeps the story rolling, explaining how after a ton of casualties on both sides, the elf and spirit cult finally got shut down. And ever since, elves have been branded as public enemy number one, accused of messing with people's heads. A light bulb goes off for Setsuna, so the whole ancient magic thing was just a PR move to cover up the existence of spirit-wielding magic, a classic historical cover-up in this wild Manhwa-style world. Morgana's like, bingo, confirming that's exactly why they slapped a new label on it. Lionel, who's still trying to download all this new info, asks Morgana if she's salty at humans for, you know, the whole persecution thing. She admits she used to be, but she's over it now. Lionel, ever the curious one, presses if she's really times over it. Morgana gives a slight nod, clarifying that while she's not holding a grudge against all humans, she's definitely keeping them at arm's length. Even after the big war, some folks are still out there hunting for elves. Yeah, even 200 years later, the hate is still going strong, which is exactly why she's living that double life, hiding her true elven self from the world. So Setsuna has to ask, why show us the real you? Morgana lays it out simple, Dan vouched for him, and Setsuna proved he wasn't a total scumbag. Plus, she saw him get all misty-eyed and figured it was time for the big reveal. Setsuna immediately backpedals, hey, I wasn't crying. He then gets lost in thought about the Great Magic War, realizing the elves used spirit magic to take down an apostle, a feat so massive it's like something from a reincarnation, Manhwa. But that kind of power play came with a heavy price, forcing them to use forbidden magic and causing tons of sacrifices. With the history lesson over, the three of them get to work, basically becoming a super-powered cleanup crew for the forest. They patch up all the damage they caused, and once the place looks pristine again, it's time to say their goodbyes. Morgana gives them a genuine thank you for tidying up. Setsuna, being all polite, says the pleasure was all his and that he's glad they met. Leanna Lynn, ever practical, asks what her next move is. Morgana's reply, since her cover's blown, she's got to find a new hideout, and yeah, they're probably never seeing each other again. But just as she's about to leave, Setsuna calls out to her. He asks, you know, if humanity is ever on the brink, can he hit her up for some of that legendary power? He even does a full-on bow, humbly asking for her help. Morgana just smirks, telling him he's pushing his luck, but when the time comes, he should just hit up Dan Han. Apparently, she and the old man are pen pals. Setsuna lights up, thanking her profusely. And then, right on cue, Blazer pops up for some last-minute trash talk. He sneers at Morgana, telling her not to think a little sparring match settles things and that next time, he's turning her into a pile of ash. Morgana just casually flicks some water at him, dryly asking if he's itching for another shower. Blazer just scoffs and turns away, and with a final wave, they all head off in their separate directions. As Setsuna hops on his lizard, his mind flashes back to a rainy day, standing outside some building. A woman had appeared with an umbrella and a towel, telling him that just because he'd stumbled into some crazy power, it didn't automatically make him a strong person. A confused Ged had asked her what she meant. She explained that immense power has a nasty habit of making people go off the deep end. The real trick, she said, was using it right without getting arrogant, without letting it control you, and not just mindlessly grinding for more strength. Now, riding away, Setsuna finally gets it. The woman's words from all that time ago suddenly make perfect sense. He makes a silent vow to use the spirit's power the right way for justice. And with Lionel riding beside him, they set a course back to school, ready to get back to the Academy Manhwa life. Meanwhile, the scene cuts to Satan and Pekka. Satan tells Pekka it's go time. Leo is standing there, looking like he's about to be sick, as Puka lays into him about failing to kill Setsuna and ditching his own partner. Isn't that, like, a major breach of contract? Leo frantically denies it, begging Puka to cut him some slack, claiming he at least finished the mission to take out Morgana. Satan raises an eyebrow. And did you actually check for a body to confirm she was gone? Leo stammers, admitting that with the sheer force of the attack, there's no way she could have survived, right? So, you think your boss is bad? Try reporting back to the literal Lord of Darkness after you totally botched a high-stakes mission. Satan shot Leo a look that could curdle milk, reminding him the job was to take out Morgana, not let Setsuna walk away. And for crying out loud, he could have at least snagged Zan's body on the way out, because if he'd just done that one simple thing, they could have salvaged the entire operation. Satan was already picturing a custom-built undead rocking Zan's powers, a plan now totally up in smoke. Leo, trying to save his own skin, sputtered that Setsuna knew about Zan's abilities, a detail conveniently left out of the mission briefing. Satan was unimpressed, retorting that excuses don't change his failure, and now they had to completely rethink their profile on this Setsuna kid. The guy was clearly hiding a few aces up his sleeve. Puka, ever the pot stirrer, piped up from the side. So, did your little undead puppet get smashed to bits, too? Just then, a figure emerged from the shadows, catching Giovanni Satan's eye. Tsukuyomi, he called out, his voice low, think you can clean up this mess? Like I have a choice. She shot back, her voice dripping with destiny. The time was almost right. After all, Tsukumi, the eighth apostle, could literally bring people back from the great beyond. Yeah, things are about to get wild, so if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a second of it. Meanwhile, miles away, Setsuna and Lionel were on a road trip under a perfect sky. Lionel figured they were about half a day out from the academy, which got Setsuna wondering how the rest of the squad was holding up. Lionel, ever the warrior, guessed Drago was probably training himself into the ground. Setsuna chuckled, agreeing, and had a moment of self-reflection. Like, wait, since when do I actually care about other people? You weren't always like this? Lionel asked, intrigued. Setsuna admitted it was true. His past self was a one-track mind-training machine, hell-bent on mastering the pinnacle of long-range magic. His old philosophy? Become a one-man army and you'll never need a backup squad. Everyone else was just background noise, which explains the seriously short friends list he used to have, but that was the old him. This new life, this whole asterisk reincarnation Manhwa asterisk do-over, came with a crew he could actually count on. Plus, he'd finally figured out that there's more to strength than just nuking things from a distance. And get this, all that insane magic control he'd grinded for before his return, turns out it's ridiculously overpowered for getting up close and personal in a fight. Lionel was quick to point out that magic control like that isn't just raw talent, it's forged in pure, hardcore training. He was pretty sure Setsuna's god-tier skills weren't something you just pick up in a couple of years. In his mind, Setsuna must have gone through decades of some kind of brutal, non-stop training to get that good. It was the only theory that explained how he became the world's biggest badass. Lionel was convinced the dude had a backstory that would blow your mind. Anyway, they decided to pull over for a quick break. Setsuna used the downtime to check out the loot he got from Morgana. He scanned a note, a slow grin spreading across his face. Oh yeah, this was definitely going to be useful. He'd save it for the perfect moment. Lionel, meanwhile, was geeking out over the necklace, claiming he could feel the vibe of a water spirit from it. Setsuna wasn't surprised. He knew Morgana's gift was basically a supernatural hotline to said spirit. So he closed his eyes, focused his energy, and tried to make the call, wondering if she'd even pick up, when a voice from the locket itself called out his name. Talk about a jump scare. Don't freak out, the voice said casually. I've basically been binge-watching your life story with Morgana. The spirit then laid out the deal, pass her trial, and her power was all his. She'd be more than happy to lend him a hand. Setsuna was like, for real? But the spirit quickly shut that down. Hold your horses, hero. Don't celebrate yet. He naturally assumed the trial was some epic battle. His mind immediately jumped to his upcoming throwdown with Blazer. But the water spirit just laughed, telling him to relax. Her trial was more of a personal growth exercise, designed to help him level up. Setsuna was totally lost. What did he need to move? The spirit explained that after eons of chilling in the spirit world, she was bored out of her mind and wanted to feel something new for a change. From somewhere, Blazer's voice grumbled in surprise about how lenient she was being, adding that it figured he'd never gotten along with her. Oh, I don't dislike you at all, Blazer, the spirit cooed back. Setsuna figured, hey, at least she's friendly, unlike Mr. Grumpy Pants. But he was still totally stuck on what she meant by moving her. Suddenly, Lionel threw an arm around Setsuna's shoulder. Dude, you are so in luck, he declared with the unshakable confidence of a seasoned bard. Because he announced dramatically, have the perfect story. A tale of fiery friendship so moving, it'll bring a tear to your eye. Even the spirit was like, okay, I'm listening. With a theatrical nod, Lionel launched into a saga about the legendary heroes who saved the nation decades ago. You know, the indestructible Blade and Wallace, the Iron Walls? Yeah, asterisk the time's whole epic. An epic tale, for sure. So epic, in fact, that as Lionel rambled on well into the night, Setsuna completely passed out. He eventually woke up to the sound of Lionel still telling his story to the water spirit. Setsuna just sighed, deciding to deal with this whole mess once they were back in the familiar halls of their asterisk academy Manhwa asterisk life. Later, he was catching up with Carol, Drago, and Isla. Isla, who clearly got the second-hand version from Lionel, asked about something that moved, while Drago, ever the straight shooter, just asked Setsuna if anything interesting happened on his little vacation. So after a light training session that probably cracked the planet's crust, Setsuna tries to play it cool. Illa, bless her heart, attempts to drag them back to civilization with an art museum trip, mentioning she's got an in with an art expert friend. Setsuna's on board, figuring a little culture couldn't hurt, which immediately cues Drago and Carol to crash the party, with Carol boasting, just leave it to me. So after the world's most intense field trip to the museum, they're heading back when Drago decides it's time for the gun show, ripping off his shirt for Setsuna. Not to be outdone, Carol unleashes her personal inferno, and even the too cool for school Blazer can't resist flashing his own powers. All the while, Setsuna is mentally a million miles away, still stressing about that water spirit. We flash to him grinding it out under the world tree, working on his reflexes, like his life depends on it, which it probably does. Blazer actually gives him a rare compliment, remarking that Setsuna's power is so dialed in, it's like having a tag team partner. The guy literally speedrun past the human limit. Setsuna, shocked to hear praise from Blazer, just tells him not to worry, promising his new techniques are pretty much ready for prime time. Then he looks around, notices the snow, and it hits him like a ton of bricks. Winter is here. The doomsday clock for the incident is ticking, and he still times, hasn't sealed the deal with the water spirit. He immediately starts packing, muttering that the training montage is on hold because something way more important just came up. Blazer's like, "You sure you're ready to call it quits?" But Setsuna is certain, saying the timing is now or never. Besides, he admits, they can't keep draining the sacred tree. Their power leveling sessions sucked up so much mana, it'll take a few years to recharge. Setsuna gives the tree a quick bow of thanks. He's grateful for the assist in mastering Blazer's power, but with the end of the year looming, he knows there's zero time to chill. Blazer picks up on the vibe, asking if a boss battle is coming. Setsuna confirms, explaining that in his previous life, a classic setup in any reincarnation, Manhwa humanity got steamrolled by the evil god. It all went down because of 4 epic failures, and the first one is set to happen in the next 7 days. Blazer, of course, asks for the disastrous details. Setsuna lays out the apocalypse checklist. Among all the invasions, 4 were absolute game changers, starting with the Great Pledge of the Dragon's silence, followed by the total destruction of the Magus army, the royal capital vanishing overnight, and the army of the underworld, which is set to mobilize within a week. As if that wasn't enough, a pop-up undead army caused devastating losses to both mages and civilians. Blazer scoffs, asking if undead are even a real threat. Setsuna shuts that down immediately, explaining these aren't your garden-variety zombies. No, these undead were once world-renowned heroes, respected and admired by all. He suspects some top-tier evil is behind it, twisting fallen legends into these corrupted super zombies. For a second, he thought Giovanni was the puppet master, but he seriously doubts that guy has enough power to command the entire army of the underworld. The next catastrophe on the schedule is a mass grave robbing in Eldon, Setsuna's own hometown, where the thieves are targeting the tombs of heroes. Most people thought they were after legendary treasures, but Blazer chimes in, clarifying that the real prize was the corpses themselves. Setsuna declares he's heading to the royal cemetery to stop the heist before it starts. Then, total tonal whiplash, we cut to the crew having a casual meal. Isla asks Drago about his winter break plans, and he proudly announces his dad is teaching him the secret, ancient family combat techniques. Carol says she's just going to be playing with Fenrir on her family's private ice planes and casually invites Blazer, who hits her with a hard pass. Ila's mind is blown that Carol's family just owns time's territory, a concept she can't even fathom. She then turns to Setsuna to ask about his plans, but our hero is completely zoned out, lost in thought. When she calls his name again, he snaps back to reality, cluelessly asking what they were talking about. Ila's first thought is that he's hiding something dangerous, but Carol leans in with some classic Academy manhwa drama, whispering that Setsuna is secretly a hot commodity with the ladies. She warns Isla that if she doesn't make a move soon, she's going to lose her chance. Isla, flustered, insists that's not what's happening at all. Carol just gives her a knowing look, telling her not to be shy. Desperate to change the subject, Isla asks Setsuna where he's from. He replies quietly, an orphanage in the Elena region. So Isla's just mentioning how the place is, like, right next to her family's inn. And of course Carl, who was totally eavesdropping, just has to butt in like, wait, your family runs an inn? Setsuna, completely unbothered, hits him with a yin. Who are you? Carl, looking personally offended, puffs out his chest and declares he's Carl the Noble, as if that's supposed to mean something. Then he immediately pivots to inviting Isla to his exclusive salon.